Chapter 877. In everyone's eyes, World Chamber of Commerce was the weaker party compared to Heartless Palace. It was good enough that Heartless Palace didn't cause trouble for World Chamber of Commerce. At least for now, no one believed that Yu Qianqiu would confuse right and wrong to cause trouble for Heartless Palace. Therefore, after hearing Yu Qianqiu's indignant shout, everyone felt that Feng Jiuru had crossed the line. They all thought that Heartless Palace was too arrogant to cause trouble in hallucinatory Immortal City. This was a slap to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's face. For a moment, both in the open and in the dark, the comments condemning the Heartless Palace immediately caused an uproar, but no one suspected that Yu Qianqiu was talking nonsense. Feng Jiuru, that little bastard? Wei Chuanqiu glared at him and said angrily, "This is too much. I'll go kill him now." The old bat was also irritated by her words. With him here, Feng Jiuru, a junior, dared to come and make trouble. How could he be so shameless? Stop. Yu Qianqiu grabbed Wei Chuanqiu, who didn't know the details, and said loudly, "They are the biggest sect in the immortal realm. They have the right to disregard the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's rules. But we don't have the right to be rude and unreasonable like them. Quickly go to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and ask someone to uphold justice." He secretly scolded, "Old bat, don't ruin my plan. Do as I say." Wei Chuanqiu was startled. Then he waved his sleeve and turned into a stream of light heading to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Yu Qianqiu's words caused the discussions in the surroundings to reach a climax. The Chamber of Commerce Alliance represented the Immortal Palace. Disregarding the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance was a huge accusation. If these words were to spread, it would be a headache for the Heartless Palace. Some people in the crowd had changed their expressions and retreated quietly. The people of World Chamber of Commerce also stood at the gate angrily to express their silent protest. Yu Nantian, who was beside Hu Changshou, slightly tilted his head and transmitted his voice, "Only the torture envoy dares to do such a big thing. If it were us, we would have to think twice." "That's right." Hu Changshou sent a telepathic message to Meng Qi. "The torturer is going to wrestle with the Heartless Palace. To be honest, I'm a little worried. After all, they're the #1 sect in the immortal world. What are you afraid of? At worst, we can just return to the human world. If we can't do it in the open, we can still have a chance to develop in the dark." Yu Nantian replied disapprovingly, "As for those individual cultivators just now, although you don't belong to any sect and neither side is involved, why did you come here for no reason? Alas, it's their bad luck to run into a torturer who doesn't play by the rules. I feel sorry for them." In the inner room of the Passionless Palace's branch, Feng Jiuru sat on the high seat, while the 4 leaders of the 4 islands of the lake, Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan sat on either side of her. The 4 of them were originally from the same sect, and the 4 islands of Lake Light were originally one family. Later on, because their master died at the hands of an enemy, a dispute arose between the 4 of them, and they all wanted to be the sect leader. As a result, a good sect was split into 4 and became 4 families. The 4 islands of Lake Light were within the main sphere of influence of the Passionless Palace, and they had always followed the Passionless Palace's lead. However, that didn't mean that they would throw away their lives. When they heard the summons, they hurried over. At first, they didn't know what it was for. When they arrived, Feng Jiuru asked them perfunctorily, "Who is willing to snatch the territory of the world commerce?" When the 4 of them heard this, their expressions changed drastically. They weren't fools. The matter of Yu Qianqiu killing the disciples of the Passionless Palace in the ruins of God was already known to the world. It could be considered as a feud with the Passionless Palace. Coupled with the news that the world commerce was about to open, they immediately understood that the 4 of them were going to become tools for others to use. If it was to deal with an ordinary person, the 4 of them might fight to do it. With the support of the Passionless Palace, in addition to the fact that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation wasn't that great, they could also obtain a piece of land that was famous in the immortal world. It could be said to be a wonderful job. However, this Yu Qianqiu wasn't ordinary. He had the Green Wing Bat King and the White Cloud Mountain Master by his side. If they really snatched Yu Qianqiu's territory, then they might as well hide in the illusory Immortal City for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, how would the 2 early-stage Immortal Emperor experts let them off? No matter how good the territory was, it wasn't as important as their own lives. No matter how Feng Jiuru talked, the 4 of them were still vaguely unwilling to nod in agreement. Seeing that the soft approach didn't work, Feng Jiuru didn't hold back anymore. She directly used a hard threat and said bluntly, "Everyone, we have no choice in this matter. If those 2 old monsters want to kill you, my Passionless Palace is still confident that we can protect you. However, if my passionless palace wants to kill you, those two old monsters definitely won't be able to protect you. Everyone better think clearly. Don't do things that you shouldn't have done. Since she had already said it to this point, the four of them really had no choice but to reluctantly agree. However, they had a stomach full of complaints. Master Ya and Shui Mingqing, Huo Lianqing and Hui Yunlong, Du Kairan and Du Feng, and Wan Ling were also in the room. The last three pairs of master and disciple, or father and son, had taken the initiative to come to the sect to congratulate the opening of World Commerce Firm. It could be said that they were prepared to give Yu Qianqiu a great deal of face. Huo Lianqing and the others hadn't expected Yu Qianqiu's momentum to develop so fiercely. He had actually managed to establish a world commerce firm on his own and had even made quite a name for himself. They were acutely aware that this was a good opportunity because Yu Qianqiu had a good relationship with their sons or disciples. If they could use this opportunity to raise the status of world commerce firm, as long as Yu Qianqiu wasn't stupid, he would appreciate this favor and naturally deepen his relationship with their sons or disciples. This was undoubtedly beneficial to Yu Qianqiu, but it was also very beneficial to the juniors like Hui Yunlong. For these juniors, the competition within the sect was fierce. If they were on the same starting line as their peers in the sect, they would already have a close relationship with the sect leaders of other sections. This was definitely something that would give them extra points in the sect. If World Commerce Firm's status in the immortal world was higher, Hui Yunlong and the others who had a good relationship with sect master Yu Qianqiu would naturally stand out among their peers in the sect. This problem seemed complicated, but it was actually very simple. For example, the position of deacon in Chaotian Palace would be given to anyone with similar conditions. There was a time when they needed to purchase some urgently needed immortal herbs and World Commerce Firm happened to be selling them. However, World Commerce Firm purposely raised the price or didn't want to sell them. Because Shui Mingqing had a good relationship with World Commerce Firm's sect master Yu Qianqiu, Chaotian Palace sent Shui Mingqing to talk to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu finally sold the immortal herbs to Chaotian Palace for the sake of their friendship. Chaotian Palace benefited from this, so they naturally had to look up to Shui Mingqing. Like Master Ya and the others, they wouldn't give up an opportunity to help their son and disciple pave the way, so this group of people came. Wan Ling was different from everyone else. She was forced to come by her grandfather. A group of people were originally going to World Commerce Firm to congratulate them, but who knew that Feng Jiuru would suddenly issue a warning? As a result, a group of people postponed the congratulation. As a result, they gathered together and waited for a while. It wasn't that they were afraid of Feng Jiuru, but they wanted to see how Yu Qianqiu would deal with this. If Yu Qianqiu couldn't even get past this, they wouldn't go to congratulate him. Chapter 878. In reality, Wang Yi didn't want to care about Feng Jiuru's *T warning. As the largest chamber of commerce in the immortal realm, it wasn't far from the Heartless Palace. Most importantly, Wan Bushing had told him that he couldn't treat Yu Qianqiu lightly. However, unexpectedly, Wan Ling stopped him from congratulating and told him to wait and follow the crowd. They would do what everyone else did. Wang Yi thought it was strange, but he knew that Wan Ling was sent by Wan Bushing. She was the one who could make the decision. As for the reason, only Wan Ling knew. She didn't like the Heartless Palace for a long time, but she didn't expect the Heartless Palace to make a move on the secret agent sent by the Immortal Emperor. She was delighted and looked forward to the scene of the Immortal Palace taking care of the Heartless Palace. The elders sat across from each other and chatted casually. The younger ones were polite and answered questions. Du Feng, Hui Yunlong, and Shui Mingqing were much more casual with each other because the three of them were friends. However, the three of them were much more polite to Wan Ling. They all remembered how Wan Ling had held Yu Qianqiu's hand in front of everyone. They didn't know what the relationship between her and Yu Qianqiu was. Although these people stayed here, they never stopped receiving news from the outside. They were always aware of the World Chamber of Commerce's movements. If there was anyone who was really worried about Yu Qianqiu, it was probably Shui Mingqing because he vaguely knew that there was an unknown power behind Yu Qianqiu that would be of great help to his future development. Once he left Yu Qianqiu's help, it wouldn't be long before the fake halo above his head was exposed. At that time, he would lose his foothold in Skyward Palace. Therefore, after Shui Mingqing knew that Feng Jiuru was going to deal with Yu Qianqiu, he was very anxious. He was a little distracted when he talked to everyone. Just as everyone was patiently waiting, the latest news about the World Chamber of Commerce arrived. All the disciples told them about Yu Qianqiu's furious actions in detail. After they heard the latest news, all of them looked at each other with dumbstruck expressions, and Wang Yi said with astonishment, "This Yu Qianqiu is quite audacious to kill people in Illusory City again. But this Feng Jiuru is even more daring." She actually dares to openly smash and rob in the World Commerce Association. She really doesn't place the rules of the Commerce Association alliance in her eyes. Sitting cross-legged opposite him, Yadonglu slowly shook his head and muttered, "Why do I feel that something is wrong? Feng Jiru might be arrogant, but she was not arrogant enough to go against the Immortal Palace, was she? Openly smashing and robbing in the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce? Unbelievable. What's so unbelievable about that? That guy is too arrogant. Otherwise, why would he do something like warning the sects? Does he really think that his heartless palace has the final say in the immortal world?" Huofeng chuckled and said, "Normally, small sects would be afraid of Heartless Palace's power and wouldn't dare to make a sound. But this Yu Qianshou is quite interesting. He's a person who can't tolerate sand in his eyes." Feng Jiru sent people to provoke him, but he was even more ruthless. He didn't place Heartless Palace in his eyes at all. He directly killed the people Feng Jiru sent, and still wants to complain to the Commerce Association Alliance. This time Feng Jiru is playing with thorns. This Yu Qianshou is not to be trifled with. I'm afraid he'll ruthlessly bite him, enough to make him suffer. Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. At this time, Du Kairen stood up and said to Du Feng, "We should go congratulate that friend of yours for opening his business." Yafuzi also stood up and said, "That's right. Yu Qianshou is alone and weak. He needs someone to support him lest someone bullies him." They laughed again and left one after another for the World Commerce Association. However, Wangi, Huofeng, Yadonglu, and Du Nanshan didn't go. Since their respective sects had sent representatives, there was no need for them to join in the fun. Instead, they returned to their own territories. Yu Qianshou stood alone in front of the World Commerce Association's building with his hands behind his back. He stood there motionlessly, his slightly closed eyes flashing from time to time. His big red robe was exceptionally eye-catching. "Get out of the way." An angry shout came. The crowd of onlookers in the air suddenly quietened down and made way for him. Yu Qianshou narrowed his eyes and saw 6 people standing in the crowd that had parted. 2 blue-clothed men were at the front, and the elder in the lead pointed at him and shouted angrily, "You are Yu Qianshou?" Yu Qianshou's brows moved slightly, vaguely guessing who it was. He immediately sneered and said, "You're that old man Feng Jiru who deliberately made life difficult for my World Commerce Association? How dare you?" Sun Luan shouted. Feng Jiru was so angry that she laughed and said, "What an arrogant brat." The master and disciple landed in front of Yu Qianshou. Feng Jiru pointed at the mutilated corpse on the ground and said aggressively, "Why are you framing this old man?" Yu Qianshou sneered and said, "I'm framing you? Damn it. I didn't even know who you were before this. I was even eager to avoid your heartless palace. It's more like I have nothing better to do. Only a ghost would frame you." The surrounding people nodded inwardly, deeply agreeing with Yu Qianshou's words. Unless Yu Qianshou was tired of living, he wouldn't deliberately frame Feng Jiru. The news that Feng Jiru had released against Yu Qianshou was true. The lords crowded at the entrance of the World Commerce Association building were sweating in their palms. What if they angered the other party by spouting nonsense so unscrupulously? Feng Jiru suddenly realized that she was too agitated and had lost her poise. She immediately took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She took a step forward and said arrogantly, "Brat, it's impossible to get away with making irresponsible remarks. This old man isn't that easy to frame. If you can't produce evidence, then shut up. Otherwise you'll have to bear the consequences." "Old man, how dare you threaten me in front of so many people? Do you think the World Commerce Association is run by your heartless palace?" Yu Qianshou retorted, almost spitting at the other party's face. Seeing that the other party was about to flip out again, he immediately waved his hand and shouted, "Before the World Commerce Association sends someone over, I have the right to remain silent. The World Commerce Association will decide what's right and wrong. I won't keep you company." He flicked his sleeve and turned to leave. "Stop right there," Feng Jiru shouted. No soul formation cultivator had ever dared to speak to her like this. She had just calmed herself down, but she instantly exploded again. In the end, Yu Qianshou shouted even louder than her. He turned around and pointed at Feng Jiru's nose and roared, "This is my territory. If you don't want to stay, then scram. Anyway, shut up. I'm warning you, old man. If you dare to threaten me again, I will treat your threat as a serious provocation under the watchful eyes of everyone. I have the right to launch a counterattack, and when that happens, the responsibility will not be on me." There was an uproar in the air. Everyone felt that Yu Qianshou had gone too far. Feng Jiru also laughed and said disdainfully, Then I'd like to see how you're going to fight back. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and turned to the top of the building. He cupped his hands and shouted, "Mountain Master Bai Yun, thank you." As soon as he finished speaking, a white light landed beside him. A pair of sharp eyes stared at Feng Jiru. As soon as Yun Peng appeared, the entire place fell silent. Feng Jiru's pupils contracted as if someone had grabbed her by the neck. She couldn't say a word. Only then did everyone remember. How could they have forgotten about this person? This guy was famous for being a cold-faced killer many years ago. He was much colder than the green-winged Bat King. "How about I kill you?" Yun Peng asked simply. His sharp eyes shone with a cold light as he stared at Feng Jiru. Feng Jiru's expression froze. She cupped her hands and said awkwardly, "So it's Mountain Master Bai Yun. Please forgive me." "How about I kill you?" Yun Peng asked simply again. Even though it was the same question, everyone shuddered. They suddenly felt like Yun Peng was like a half-drawn sword. He began to emit a faint killing intent, and the surrounding temperature dropped slightly. Feng Jiru slowly retreated with a stiff expression. "Mountain Master Bai Yun, my heartless palace doesn't seem to have any grudges with you. Why do you have to bully us?" Her disciple, Sun Luan, also retreated with a pale face. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yun Peng with admiration. He thought to himself, "So it's more frightening when you speak in a straightforward manner." "Stop!" A cold shout suddenly reverberated in the air. For streams of light descended and appeared. Wei Chuanqiu walked out from the group of four and came to Yu Qianqiu's side. He pointed at the thin golden-robed man and said, "I've invited the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's great bright will-bearer to uphold justice." Yu Qianqiu immediately bowed. He had heard of this man but had never seen him. He knew that this man was the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's leader. After Yun Peng and the thin man exchanged a glance, they turned into streams of light and returned to the World Commerce Alliance's rooftop. It was obvious that Yun Peng was unwilling to face this man. Feng Jiru heaved a sigh of relief. She quickly cupped her hands and bowed to the thin man. "Greetings, great bright will-bearer." Sun Luan also bowed. When Wei Chuanqiu saw Feng Jiru, he immediately pointed at her and shouted, "Little B****, how dare you jump on my head? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go back then. I would have killed you directly." Everyone immediately heard a story from his words. The corner of Feng Jiru's mouth twitched. Seeing the great bright wheel beside her, she knew that nothing would happen. She immediately gathered her courage and shouted, "Bat King Wei, please watch your mouth." "Wow. Now it's terrible." Wei Chuanqiu let out a strange cry. He flipped his claws out of his sleeves and disappeared on the spot. As Feng Jiru turned pale with fright, she saw the great bright wheel's golden sleeve point out 2 fingers, and a dazzling silver plate with a diameter of 2 meters suddenly appeared from the fingertips, like a bright moon protecting Feng Jiru. Dong! A muffled sound rang out. Although it was not loud, it seemed to pierce through everyone's eardrums, causing them to tremble and go limp. The silver plate suddenly flashed with a strong white light, bouncing back a green light. When the green light appeared, Wei Chuanqiu could not control his body and slid backward. His feet were like iron plows creating a deep ravine. Chapter 879. A white light flashed and the bright moon disappeared. Deming Luan said indifferently, "Wei Chuanqiu, do you think I'm a decoration?" Wei Chuanqiu waved his sleeves and forcefully stopped. His thighs had already sunk into the ground. Then he jumped out and pointed at Feng Jiru. "Deming Luan, this bastard sent people to World Commerce Hall to smash and rob and you didn't care. Instead you attacked me. Is this the rule of your Commerce Hall Alliance?" Deming Luan crossed his sleeves over his stomach and said indifferently, "If you want to solve it yourself, why did you have to drag me out?" Wei Chuanqiu's neck thickened and he wanted to argue, but he was pulled back by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the trench in the ground and said painfully, "Who did I offend? There are always people coming to make trouble when I establish World Commerce Hall. It's fine if Heartless Palace came to make trouble, but why did you join in as well? A good piece of land was turned into this by you. Are you going to pay for the repair?" Wei Chuanqiu's expression froze and he said in shock, "Look at the situation now, you still care about this little bit of money?" Everyone was speechless. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "If it wasn't for money, why would I waste so much effort to establish this commerce hall?" At this time there was a slight commotion in the crowd in the air. Several figures landed on the ground. They were none other than the representatives sent by Wan Gu Tong and the other 3 sects, Wan Ling and Du Kairen, who brought their disciples. "World Commerce Hall's opening has alarmed Deming Luan's representative?" Du Kairen said in surprise. He had already cupped his hands in greeting. He wasn't pretending to be surprised, but he really didn't expect the representative of the Commerce Hall Alliance to come. The others also followed suit and saluted. However, their attention was soon attracted by the exposed corpses on the ground. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with complicated expressions. Deming Luan nodded slightly and said, "What are you four sects doing here? Are you here to congratulate the opening of World Commerce Hall?" Du Karen's representative answered, "Manager is wise, we are here to congratulate Yu Qianqiu on the opening of the World Chamber of Commerce." The others also nodded in agreement. When he said this, the expressions of everyone present varied. The Deming Luan looked at Yu Qianqiu with deep meaning. Feng Jiru, on the other hand, had a gloomy expression on her face as she kept her mouth shut. It was obvious that these families were not giving her any face. Yu Qianqiu immediately cupped his hands and laughed. "Welcome. Welcome. A warm welcome. Please come inside. I will go and thank you after I have settled a small matter here. Wuchangshu Yunantian, come and entertain the guests." While speaking, he nodded to Shui Mingqing and the other friends. The gate, which was blocked by the lords of the kingdoms, was suddenly empty. The two groups of people with big red flowers on their chests formed an 8 shape again. Wuchangshu and Yunantian came together and waved their hands to invite the guests. Huo Lianqing waved his hand and said, "There's no need to stand on ceremony. Since it is just a small matter, it is fine for us to wait." Yu Qianqiu, why did people die here? What exactly happened? This question was a little fake. Everyone knew that these people couldn't possibly not know what happened here. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "My World Commerce Association is opening for business today, and a few scum who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth suddenly came to my place to smash and rob. I naturally couldn't sit by idly and immediately took countermeasures. Who knew that these people couldn't take a beating and spilled everything in order to save their lives? So there is a mastermind behind this. Such a thing actually happened in the hallucinatory immortal city?" Yafuzi looked at Yu Qianqiu with a frown and said, "Who is the mastermind? Who is so daring? They simply don't put the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance in their eyes." Yu Qianqiu opened his claw and took a head from the ground into his hand. He lifted it up and said, "This person said that they were sent by Feng Jiru, the elder of Heartless Palace. Nonsense." Feng Jiru immediately roared and defended herself. "Don't listen to his nonsense. This brat is deliberately framing me. I didn't do such a thing at all." Deming Luan said calmly, "Since you didn't do it, then let him finish. The truth can't be faked, the lies can't be true. No one can frame you." Once he spoke, Feng Jiru immediately lost her temper. She could only grit her teeth and stare at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu coughed and continued while holding the head. He said that Feng Jiru, the elder of Heartless Palace, was not only the mastermind behind this matter, but also the one who caused trouble during my World Chamber of Commerce's recruitment last time. He also said that not only that, Feng Jiru also sent a warning letter to the various sects, threatening them not to come and support my World Chamber of Commerce. She wants to make a fool out of us. Just as he finished speaking, he heard Du Kairen sneer and say, "I don't know about the other things, but Elder Feng sent a warning letter to my spirit cultivation sect. I can testify to this. As for whether or not he warned the other sects, we'll have to ask everyone. My Skyward Palace also received Elder Feng's warning," Yafuzi said indifferently. Huo Lianqing nodded and said, "My Mythical Fire Palace also received it." Wan Ling cupped her fists and smiled. "Elder Feng also took care of my Wangu Tong." After these people interjected for a while, the onlookers immediately sighed. This undoubtedly proved that Feng Jiru was the one who did all these things, and they all thought that Feng Jiru was going to be in trouble this time. Feng Jiru's expression also changed greatly. She realized that sending a warning letter to the various sects was indeed too stupid. For a moment, she was very nervous and couldn't help but secretly observe the changes in Deming Luan's expression. Wei Chuanxiu stared at Feng Jiru with a sneer. Although Yu Qianqiu had a sincere expression, he was also gloating in his heart. He thought to himself, "This is the result of provoking me." However, to everyone's surprise, Deming Luan looked around and said, "I've also heard about Feng Jiru sending a letter to threaten the various sections. Moreover, there are so many witnesses it seems like it's not fake. The conflict between your sects and the various merchant houses has never stopped. It's normal for threats to come and go. As long as you don't violate the rules of the illusionary immortal city, my Merchant House Alliance won't interfere. If we want to interfere, we will only interfere with those who brazenly violate the rules." Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was pondering what these words meant when he suddenly heard someone calling him. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Here." Other than your World Merchant House's people, did anyone else see these dead people smashing and robbing in your World Merchant House? Deming Luan asked. Yu Qianqiu was startled and felt that something was wrong. He looked around and it seemed too late to find an outsider to testify. He gritted his teeth and replied, I don't know if anyone else saw it. I'm afraid that even if someone saw it, they would be afraid of Heartless Palace's despotic power and wouldn't dare to stand out to testify. Deming Luan lowered his eyes and sighed softly. Since there are no outsiders to testify, why did you kill all these people? Even if only one was left alive, he would be a good witness. Now that there are no witnesses, do you want me to believe your World Merchant House's side of the story? As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately felt the wind change. Feng Jiru's expression was somewhat overjoyed. She didn't know why this person in charge of the Merchant House Alliance wanted to help her. They had never interacted before. Could it be that he had a deep relationship with the sect? At this point, Deming Luan's calm tone suddenly became stern. In the future, don't bother me with things without evidence. I'm not a selfless judge and don't have the time to distinguish right from wrong. My Merchant House Alliance knows what to do. Now that someone has pulled me here, I can't just go back without doing anything. Because what I'm seeing now is someone brazenly violating the Merchant House Alliance's rules. Yu Qianqiu, how dare you kill people in hallucinatory Immortal City twice in a row? Are you looking down on my Merchant House Alliance's rules? Everyone was silent. Du Kairen and the others who had come to see Feng Jiru's misfortune were all stunned. Feng Jiru's spirits rose. She didn't expect that she would gain the upper hand in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. How did the ending turn out like this? He immediately cupped his hands and explained, Leader is wise. My World Merchant House only wants to do business honestly. However, the wind won't stop when the tree desires peace. Seeing that someone has come to kill my World Merchant House, can't my World Merchant House protect itself? Did I say that you can't protect yourself? On Deming Luan's thin face, under his thick eyebrows, his eyelids flickered with a bright light. He said in an imposing manner, You have Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng here. Is there a need to kill a few soul formation cultivators? You don't even want to leave any evidence that's beneficial to you. Do you want my Merchant House Alliance to work for you? Do you think the Merchant House Alliance is something you can order around? Ask the entire immortal world if there's such a good thing? His words made Yu Qianqiu speechless. He could see that Feng Jiru had already made up his mind. No matter how glib your tongue was, Feng Jiru had everything under his control. The situation was completely under his control. It was useless no matter how you tried to reason with him. Feng Jiru had absolute strength. If he said that Yu Qianqiu was wrong, then Yu Qianqiu was wrong. If he said that Feng Jiru was wrong, then she definitely couldn't be right either. This was what it meant to be a king. All ghosts and monsters couldn't withstand a single blow. But this way Wei Chuanqiu couldn't take it anymore. He shouted, Deming Luan, according to what you said, we can't get away with killing people in self-defense? Deming Luan looked at him and said indifferently, Since there is indeed a reason for this, I won't pursue it. But he suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the crowd. If anyone dares to disregard the rules of the Merchant House Alliance again, I don't care who is right or wrong, I will punish them severely. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly in his heart. What a powerful guy. He and Feng Jiru had been arguing for a long time, but neither of them had gained the upper hand. Instead, he had let everyone see his majesty and took the opportunity to warn everyone. Wei Chuanqiu, who was ready to argue with Deming Luan, was also speechless. He didn't expect Deming Luan to pick it up and then put it down gently. He was so angry that he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't say what he wanted to say to Feng Jiru with Deming Luan. Chapter 880. She didn't even look for your World Chamber of Commerce to settle the score, so how could you expect her to look for Feng Jiru? Wei Chuanqiu stared at the big Ming Luan, the mustache on his lips trembling. He then raised his head to look at Yun Peng, who had left the building as soon as possible. He realized that Yun Peng was still the smart one, trying his best not to interact with the big Ming Luan. At this moment, a flying shuttle flying above the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce attracted everyone's attention. The flying shuttle slowly descended, and on it stood two golden-robed men and a petite beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu, who had been tormented to the point of losing his temper, was slightly startled. He couldn't help exchanging glances with Shui Mingqing and the others because the woman standing on the flying shuttle was none other than Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. When Mu Tianjiao saw Yu Qianqiu, she smiled sweetly and nodded. Her gaze fell on the corpse on the ground and she couldn't help but be stunned. When she saw that there were people wearing the clothes of the immortal palace present, she was even more baffled. After the three of them got off the flying shuttle, one of the golden-robed men whispered a few words to Mu Tianjiao, while the other quickly put away the flying shuttle. The three of them walked together to the Great Bright Wheel and saluted, "Greetings, Great Bright Wheel Bearer." De Ming Luan nodded slightly and looked at Mu Tianjiao suspiciously. "This young lady looks unfamiliar. May I know who you are?" There were too many people in the immortal palace. He didn't even know who the two golden-robed men were, let alone Mu Tianjiao, because he had never seen her before. "This junior is Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce." Mu Tianjiao bowed respectfully. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings immediately became restless. It turned out that this woman was the woman of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong. Those who didn't know her immediately memorized Mu Tianjiao's appearance so that they wouldn't do anything stupid in the future. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng's expressions were somewhat bitter. "Oh." De Ming Luan immediately understood and said with a faint smile, "So it is Wu Xiong's wife. There is no need to say junior. Wu Xiong and I have a close relationship and we are all on the same side. If you continue to call yourself junior, Wu Xiong will realize that he is a generation lower than you and will not be happy." "Why are you here?" A complicated look flashed across Mu Tianjiao's eyes. She cupped her hands and said, "Yu Qianqiu and I are friends. I heard that the World Chamber of Commerce is opening, so I came to congratulate you." Hearing this, many people felt a chill in their hearts. They no longer dared to look down on Yu Qianqiu. This Yu Qianqiu had undoubtedly formed a relationship with Wu Xiong. De Ming Luan was startled. After sizing up Yu Qianqiu, he smiled and said, "Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. When you have time, come visit the Chamber of Commerce Alliance." After greeting them, he glanced at Wei Chunqiu and left with his two subordinates. As soon as he left, the oppressive atmosphere immediately became relaxed. Yu Qianqiu winked at Hu Changqiu and Yu Nantian, and the two of them immediately went to deal with the bodies on the ground. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his hands at the people who came to congratulate him. "Thank you for your support. Please come in." The few of them looked at Mu Tianjiao, wanting her to leave first. Although her cultivation wasn't much, her current status was extraordinary. Mu Tianjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. She took out a gift box from her storage bracelet and offered it to him. "This is a small token of my appreciation. I wish Sect Master you luck in opening the Chamber of Commerce." "I've spent a lot of money, a lot of money." Yu Qianqiu smiled as he received it with both hands. He inadvertently touched a few of Mu Tianjiao's fingers. He didn't feel anything, but Mu Tianjiao's hand trembled slightly. Just as Yu Qianqiu stuffed the gift box into his storage pouch, Wan Ling also came over with a gift box. She said with a smile, "Just a little something. Sect Master Yu, the World Chamber of Commerce's business is booming." Then Shui Mingqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng also presented their congratulatory gifts. Yu Qianqiu smiled like a flower and thanked them profusely. "You're too polite. Please come in. Everyone please come in." He waved his hand and impolitely stuffed the gifts into his storage pouch. Under his guidance, the people who came to congratulate him stepped into the building curiously. Wei Chuanqiu didn't leave. He stared at Feng Jiuru and warned her with a voice transmission, "You're lucky today. If you have the ability, you can hide in the hallucinatory immortal city for the rest of your life. If you dare to take one step out of the hallucinatory immortal city, I'll immediately cut off your head to use as a cushion." Feng Jiuru's expression was dark and gloomy as she gritted her teeth. She had lost a lot of face today and had undoubtedly lost the face of the Heartless Palace. If the sect got wind of this, they would inevitably be out of luck. Not only that, Wei Chuanqiu just had to threaten to kill her. Since that was the case, no one would have an easy time. Feng Jiuru slowly put her hands behind her back. Her gaze swept across the 4 islands sect masters in the sky and she calmly transmitted her voice to them. "Now it's your turn to make a move. Whoever kills Yu Qianqiu can obtain this territory. My Heartless Palace will also strongly support his development." Lan Hao and the other 3 looked at each other with an indescribably bitter expression. Everyone had seen everything that had just happened. Even Feng Jiuru herself couldn't do anything to the World Chamber of Commerce, so what could they do? That's right, the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance allowed a sect master to challenge another sect master. But if they really did such a thing, judging from Wei Bat King's temper, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Excluding this point, even Wu Xiong's wife had come to support Yu Qianqiu. Could they afford to offend such a person? "What? Are you afraid or do you want to go back on your word?" Feng Jiuru warned sternly. Either you didn't agree to me in the first place, or don't even think about going back on your word. Otherwise, don't even think about returning to the 4 islands of Lake Light. I'll send people to take good care of your families. This was a naked threat. The 4 of them were shocked when they heard this. Lan Hao replied angrily, Elder Feng, aren't you going too far by doing this? Is this your personal intention or the intention of the Heartless Palace? Heartless Palace is the #1 sect in the immortal world. I've never heard of Heartless Palace using other people's families to threaten people. There aren't many reasons. Feng Jiuru indifferently said, if anyone can kill Yu Qianqiu while challenging him, not only can they obtain this mountain, I will also do my best to facilitate the unification of the 4 islands of Lake Light. From then on, there will only be 1 sect master in charge of the 4 islands of Lake Light. That's all I have to say. Do as you see fit. As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Jiuru suddenly looked into the sky. She saw figures landing one after another. Judging by their clothes, they were obviously disciples from various sections. She even knew many of them. They were all walking towards the entrance of the World Commerce Association. The 2 rows of people at the entrance with big red flowers on their chests hurriedly welcomed them. Feng Jiuru was so angry that she almost vomited blood. This was called a broken drum beating. Those sects who were watching at first saw that the World Commerce Association had stabilized the situation and immediately came to join in the fun. Every time they went to a sect, it was undoubtedly a slap to Feng Jiuru's face. Feng Jiuru angrily stared at the 4 sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Inside the lobby, there was a pool decorated with mountain spring water. There were fluorescent stones at the bottom of the pool, allowing people to clearly see the small fish swimming in it. There were crystal counters all around. All kinds of immortal herbs lay quietly inside. There were also fluorescent stones placed sporadically in the cabinets. It looked very beautiful. Yu Qianqiu used the layout of the exhibition hall from his previous life. He especially strengthened the lighting effect created by the fluorescent stones. Those who had never come in before would have their eyes light up when they saw it for the first time. This kind of environment was the most attractive to women. Wan Ling and Mu Tianjiao's eyes lit up when they walked in. They kept shaking their heads as they looked around. Every time they walked in front of a crystal cabinet, the 2 girls' attention wasn't on the immortal herbs inside. Instead, they were more focused on admiring the psychedelic colors reflected by the fluorescent stones and the crystal cabinet. The only fly in the ointment was that there had been some fighting in the lobby. Some places had already been damaged, but they had already been cleaned up. A few of the men who had come to support Yu Qianqiu saw the decorations inside, and their expressions became solemn. They could all see the value of this place, and it would definitely increase people's desire to buy it. Thus, they began to carefully observe every layout in the building. The desire to learn was in their eyes. You made the decorations here? Mu Tianjiao asked Yu Qianqiu, who was leading the way and introducing the place. The entire World Commerce Chamber of Commerce worked together. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly as they walked. Mu Tianjiao didn't think that his subordinates would have such foresight. She smiled and said, I really couldn't tell. First there were waterfalls, then there were tall buildings, and now there are these attractive decorations. You really are extraordinary. Yu Qianqiu casually said a few polite words and laughed it off. However, it was precisely because of this conversation that Mu Tianjiao took a few more glances at his subordinates. She immediately discovered that many of them were acquaintances she had seen before. This discovery surprised Mu Tianjiao a little because she had seen some of them in the Divine Ruin realm. Weren't they people that Shui Mingqing had gathered from various sects to help? How did they become Yu Qianqiu's subordinates? Shui Mingqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng didn't pay attention at first. As faces flashed past their eyes, they gradually recognized some people. The 2 of them looked at each other in dismay. Shui Mingqing was a little nervous, afraid of being exposed. Fortunately, neither Wan Ling nor Master Ye knew these people. Yu Qianqiu had just led these people to the staircase and was about to take them to the 2nd floor to continue their tour when they suddenly heard a faint voice saying welcome from outside. Everyone stopped and looked over. They saw a large group of people walking in. After coming in, they began to look at the crystal cabinets. They didn't look like people who were going to cause trouble. Wu Lianqing laughed and said, It seems that all the sects have sent people to support us. I reckon that Feng Jiuru's expression isn't good right now. Who knew that just as he finished speaking, a loud shout suddenly came from outside, Yu Qianqiu, come out! Yu Qianqiu, come out! It was shouted several times in a row. It seemed that several people were shouting at the same time, causing the lobby to reverberate continuously. Clearly they were using their cultivation to make this sound. Damn it! Who is wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves? Yu Qianqiu muttered. The voice was very unfamiliar, so it should be someone he didn't know. He quickly rushed out of the lobby and saw 4 people standing in a row not far from the door, looking at him. The various feudal lords outside the door also indicated that it was them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but frown and ask, "Why did you call me out?" Chapter 881. Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan looked at each other with complicated expressions. In just a short while, a large group of people had already rushed out of the gate, especially the green-winged Bat King Wei Chuanxiu, who was looking them up and down with an unfriendly gaze, making it difficult for them to speak. "You know them?" Wei Chuanxiu turned around and asked. When he saw Yu Qianqiu shake his head slightly to indicate that he did not know him, he immediately turned around and glared at him. "Where did this bastard come from? Why are you shouting here?" Feng Jiru, who was floating in the air, sneered. Lan Hao, who was below, took a deep breath and said, "The 4 of us are the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Unfortunately, we have taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Chamber of Commerce, so we have come to challenge the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianqiu." These words immediately caused a commotion. Those who knew them knew that they had always followed the lead of the Heartless Palace, so they quickly looked at Feng Jiru in the sky and understood what was going on. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, was startled. He did not expect that this troublesome matter would fall on him. Wei Chuanxiu checked the 4 cultivators and found that they were all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage. Thus, he sneered and said, "You know that I am here, but you dare come here to cause trouble? I don't think you fellows have the guts to do so. Tell me honestly who sent you fellows here." Her words immediately reminded everyone, and they all turned to look at Feng Jiru in the air. Ning Zixuan cupped his fists and said, "I've long heard of Bat King Wei's great name. The 4 of us wouldn't dare to cause trouble. It's just that we've taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Commerce Association. In addition, sect leader Yu's cultivation isn't high and our 4 sects are poor and can't afford to buy a mountain, so we have no choice but to challenge sect leader Yu." Her words were so direct that Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Although he had guessed that Feng Jiru was behind this, it was obvious that she thought he was a pushover. Wei Chuanxiu was stunned when she heard that. She couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. The lords of the various countries had also heard about the sect master's challenge, and they looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Su Yuchang cupped his fists and said, "Sect leader Yu, I'm sorry. Please follow us to the Life and Death Mound." The so-called Life and Death Mound was the one and only place in the illusory immortal city where one could fight, and its purpose was for the various sect leaders to challenge each other. Back when the Merchant Alliance set up this place, many people felt puzzled. Why didn't they allow people to fight in the illusory immortal city, but allowed the sect masters of the various sects to challenge each other? Everyone's gazes gathered on Yu Qianqiu. Yifuzi and the others looked at each other helplessly. They hadn't expected to encounter such a thing, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. Because this was the rule of the illusory immortal city, no one was allowed to interfere in a battle between sect masters. Yu Qianqiu was speechless at such a blatant challenge, which was allowed by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. He secretly sent a message to Wei Chuanxiu. "How are their cultivation levels?" "Their cultivation bases are not high. They are all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage." There was a hint of ridicule in Wei Chuanxiu's voice. "Damn it. Of course it's not high for you." Yu Qianqiu coughed and waved his hand at Lan Hao and the rest. "All right. Disperse. I refuse to accept your challenge." As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings went silent, and everyone revealed expressions of disbelief as they looked at him. This was the first time they'd heard of such a thing in Illusory City. "This fellow really isn't afraid of losing face because everyone in my sect is watching." Yu Qianqiu didn't feel any pressure at all. He continued to wave at everyone. "Everyone, welcome to my World Merchant Association. Everyone do what you need to do. Today, my World Merchant Association will be selling immortal herbs. All immortal herbs will be sold at half price. Everyone is welcome to purchase them." The lords didn't feel any pressure. They straightened the big red flowers on their chests and waved at everyone. "Please come in. Please come in." Everyone looked at each other. They found that as long as one was willing to lose face, everything was easy to do. Trouble would be solved in an instant. They all moved their feet and rushed inside. Wei Chuanxiu stared at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. He found that this guy's nonchalant expression didn't seem to be fake. His skin was really thick. Lan Hao and the rest didn't expect things to end like this. After being dumbfounded, they all became wild with joy. This was Yu Qianzhou's own refusal to challenge them. They couldn't be blamed. The four of them immediately looked back at Feng Jiuru in the air with a helpless expression. They were all prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Feng Jiuru's expression was distorted. She mocked loudly in the air. A dignified leader of a sect is actually afraid of battle and death. I think your World Merchant Association should just close down so that you don't embarrass yourself here. No matter how rational a person was, once they flew into a rage out of humiliation, they would always do unreasonable things. Feng Jiuru was like this. It seemed that if she didn't tear Yu Qianzhou into pieces or torment him to the point that he was too ashamed to show his face, she wouldn't be able to vent the anger in her heart. Lan Hao and the rest's expressions changed greatly. Anyone could tell that Feng Jiuru was provoking Yu Qianzhou. In an instant, everyone stopped and looked at Yu Qianzhou. Facing the pressuring gazes from all directions, Yu Qianzhou felt uncomfortable all over. He coughed and asked Wang Yi, "Elder Wan, you also know that I hate fighting and killing the most. Is it embarrassing for me to refuse someone else's challenge?" The lords were deeply suspicious of Yu Qianzhou's words that he hated fighting and killing. However, they were all on the same side, so naturally no one would expose it. Wang Yi smiled awkwardly. It's really hard to say, but you're the first sect master in the history of the psychedelic immortal city to refuse a challenge. Don't worry, no one can force you to do something like this. Just follow your heart, just follow your heart. Yu Qianzhou nodded in understanding. He then waved at everyone and said, "Everyone, please come in and do what you need to do. Don't pay attention to the mad dogs barking outside." Now that things had escalated to this point, the two sides would definitely fight to the death if there was an opportunity. However, because everyone had scruples in the psychedelic immortal city, Yu Qianzhou didn't plan to give Feng Jiuru any face. Most importantly, even if he gave her face, she wouldn't appreciate it. She would only take a mile when given an inch. Yu Qianzhou never did this kind of thing. Everyone looked at Feng Jiuru in the sky with strange expressions. They knew that he had lost a lot of face today. Not only did he lose his own face, but he also lost the Heartless Palace's face. They were afraid that the Heartless Palace wouldn't let him have a good time when he returned. This was equivalent to messing things up. Yu Qianzhou. A fierce shout came from the sky. Feng Jiuru said aggressively, "If you're afraid of death, just say it. If you don't dare to accept the challenge, then admit defeat in front of everyone. Don't think about bluffing your way through. Even if you hide today, I guarantee that there will be people coming to challenge you every day. If you have the ability, then hide for the rest of your life. Be a coward for the rest of your life." His voice shook the surroundings. He was clearly angry out of humiliation. The people from the various sects looked at him in surprise. They couldn't understand. The situation was very clear. The more he made a fuss like a shrew, the more face he would lose. Why did he have to do this? It was obvious that Yu Qianzhou wouldn't accept the challenge. Little B** starred looks like he's really eager to die. Wei Chuanqiu snorted coldly. His eyes were already filled with killing intent. Yu Qianzhou suddenly turned around and said through gritted teeth, "That's right. He's eager to die." As soon as he said that, to everyone's surprise, Yu Qianzhou leaped into the sky in a flash. He pointed at Feng Jiuru and shouted angrily, "Old dog. You're really tired of living. Don't think that I don't know that you're the one who instigated the 4 islands of Lake Light. It's none of your business whether I accept the challenge or not. If you can't stand it, then go back to your Heartless Palace." "What the hell? Why is the Heartless Palace full of scum? Scram. Don't embarrass yourself in my territory." The torturer was about to fly into a rage. The lords of the various countries exchanged glances. Everyone knew that this was how Yu Qianzhou behaved in the human world. Once he flew into a rage, there was nothing he wouldn't dare to do. Everyone couldn't hide the worry in their eyes. The difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great. In fact, Yu Qianzhou's safety was related to everyone's interests. The people of the various sects were speechless when they heard that. This Yu Qianzhou was indeed angered. He was already speaking without thinking. It was enough to target Feng Jiuru. Why did he have to drag the Heartless Palace into this? Once the Heartless Palace was angered, the consequences were not something that Yu Qianzhou or the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce could bear. Feng Jiuru's eyes were burning with excitement. She shouted, "Yu Qianzhou, how dare you insult my Heartless Palace? Don't give me that. You're already so old, yet you're still bringing out your backer. Even I feel ashamed for you. You're pestering me like a shrew." Yu Qianzhou slapped his chest and cursed. "My words are as hard as nails. I dare to say it, so I dare to accept it. I'm insulting your Heartless Palace. How can a place like you come from? Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Yun Peng, who was silently observing the situation from the rooftop, stared at Yu Qianqiu with a sharp gleam in his eyes. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes also lit up. He stroked his mustache and muttered, "How dare you insult the heartless palace like this?" Grandpa's cowardice wasn't in vain. Yafuzi, Wang Yi, and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. He was too impulsive. He was still too young. Mu Qianjiao's mouth was slightly agape. A man's courage was often the easiest thing to move a woman. Only Wan Ling had a matter-of-fact expression on her face. How could a trusted spy of an immortal emperor be afraid of the heartless palace? In truth, Yu Qianqiu was indeed enraged. However, he was not too impulsive. Feng Jiru was simply going overboard with her, pestering him time and time again. She had actually said that there would be people coming to challenge them every day. At this point, there was basically no room for reconciliation with the heartless palace. Instead, it was better to take things one step at a time. Chapter 882. Well said. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and shouted, "If that's the case, you old dog shouldn't be afraid of death like me, right?" Everyone exchanged glances with the people around them. Even Feng Jiuru felt that there was a trap in his words, but she was angered by the continuous insults. Feng Jiuru's mouth twitched and she carefully responded, "At least, if I'm the leader of a sect and I'm challenged by a sect leader in this city, there's no reason for me to be a coward. It seems that you're really not afraid of death. Very well, I hope you're really not afraid of death." After a cold snort, Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly, "Since you're not afraid of death, how about we make a bet? As long as you agree to this bet, I'll accept the challenge of the four of them at all costs." With that said, he waved his arm and pointed at Lan Hao and the others below. Countless pairs of eyes widened and countless pairs of ears pricked up. Feng Jiuru's eyes flickered and she hesitated, worried that it was a trap, but Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, "What? You don't dare?" At this point, Feng Jiuru had to find a suitable reason to retreat, so she gritted her teeth and said, "What bet?" A domineering aura suddenly erupted from Yu Qianqiu's body. His tiger-like eyes widened as he scanned the crowd around him. He didn't even look at Feng Jiuru as he pointed a finger at her and said vehemently, "I'll bet your worthless life. If I lose, you can have my head and I won't regret it. If I win, I'll end your worthless life with my own hands. You're the one who started this and you're the one who kept pestering me. Do you dare to bet your life with me?" There was silence all around and only his words echoed in the air. It was really domineering. No one expected that he, who had shamelessly refused the challenge before, would take the initiative to accept the challenge, and he even said that he would bet his life with Feng Jiuru. With such courage, who would dare to say that he was afraid of death? Now it was up to Feng Jiuru to accept the challenge. However, everyone believed that Feng Jiuru would not refuse. If she wanted to take Yu Qianqiu's life, this was the perfect opportunity. One had to know that Yu Qianqiu was only at the spirit-severing stage while the four island sect masters were at the late exalted immortal stage. If any one of them came out to challenge Yu Qianqiu, it would be hard for him to survive. Those who were concerned about Yu Qianqiu were all on tenterhooks. Mu Qianjiao's hands were clenched tightly. This was especially true for the feudal lords who had followed Yu Qianqiu to the celestial realm. They were both nervous and excited. They wanted to see the strongest torturer in the human world fight against an immortal from the celestial realm, but they were also afraid that something might happen to Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu died, they would never be able to return to the human world. Many of them still had family members in the human world. Why wouldn't I? Since you're courting death, don't blame me. Feng Jiuru kept sneering. He couldn't think of a reason to refuse. He didn't believe that a cultivator at the late stage of Supreme Immortal Realm couldn't defeat a cultivator at the Soul Formation Realm. They were on completely different levels. Besides, if he didn't dare to accept it, then what he said before would be no different from farting. If he didn't have the guts to accept it, then the Heartless Palace's face would be bitten by dogs. By then, the Heartless Palace would skin him alive. The surroundings immediately became lively. Everyone knew that there was going to be a good show. There were also many people who looked at Yu Qianqiu sympathetically. In the end, he was still forced into a dead end by Feng Jiuru. How could a small world chamber of commerce fight against the powerful Heartless Palace? They didn't even need to do anything. Four sect masters, Sect Master Yu has accepted the challenge. The next step is up to you. Feng Jiuru smiled at Lan Hao and the others. The four of them looked at each other and flashed into the sky. They waved their hands and said, "Please? No hurry." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Feng Jiuru raised her brows and said, Why? Do you want to go back on your word? Yu Qianqiu snorted and said, I'm afraid that someone will go back on his word, so I have to find a witness who can restrain both sides. Feng Jiru looked down at Wei Chuanqiu and said mockingly, Indeed, we should find a witness to prevent someone from going back on their words just because their cultivation is higher. Her meaning was obvious and she was probably referring to Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu flashed into the sky and shouted at Feng Jiru, Little bastard, who are you talking about? Feng Jiru couldn't be bothered to touch his brows and kept silent. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, I'm afraid only the great Radiance Wheel Executor can make decisions in this illusory immortal city, and only the great Radiance Wheel Executor can effectively supervise our bet. Bat King Wei, can you invite the great Bright Wheel Keeper to be a witness? As soon as these words came out, not to mention the others, even Feng Jiru was a little surprised. She looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. She didn't know where he got the confidence to ask the great Bright Wheel Keeper to be a witness. It should be known that if he, Yu Qianqiu, lost, he wouldn't even have a chance to go back on his word. If the great Bright Wheel Keeper agreed, it would definitely not let any of the losers escape. Similarly, Feng Jiru couldn't escape. Wei Chuanqiu was slightly surprised. In fact, Feng Jiru had guessed his thoughts. If Yu Qianqiu lost, he was confident that he could save Yu Qianqiu's life. But if the great Bright Wheel Keeper was present, he couldn't save him at the critical moment. Boy, are you crazy? Are you really confident that you can deal with those 4 bullsh * T-sect masters? Wei Chuanqiu secretly transmitted his voice. I can even deal with you, are you afraid that I can't deal with them? Nonsense. If I hadn't been careless and let my inner core fall into your hands, killing you would be easier than killing an ant. Do you think that my purple fire can't deal with the 4 of them? I admit that the power of the purple fire is very terrifying, but the way to fight is to adapt to the situation. Sometimes, no matter how good an external object is, it can't decide the outcome. After all, your cultivation is too low. If you insist, I won't stop you. Just return my inner core to me first. If something happens to you and I can't find my inner core, I'll be screwed by you. Damn. It seems that you don't have confidence in me. Yu Qianqiu said in a bad mood, Let me ask you, are you sure that the 4 of them are at the late exalted immortal stage and not great immortal stage? Wei Chuanqiu looked at Lan Hao and the other 3 suspiciously and replied, I have good eyesight. I'm sure that none of the 4 of them are above the late exalted immortal stage. From what you said, are you confident that you can deal with immortal cultivators below the great immortal stage? Don't worry so much, just help me invite the great Bright Wheel to be the supervisor. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided not to tell him the reason. He remembered that when he was attacked in the Granite Mountains last time, the hunchbacked old man said that only experts who had reached the great immortal stage could resist his Absorbing Star's great technique. Since the Absorbing Star's great technique could deal with these 4 guys, there was no need for him to reveal his other trump cards. The 2 of them looked at each other without saying a word. Anyone could see that they were secretly communicating with each other. The longer Feng Jiru waited, the more worried she became. She was afraid that she would be taken advantage of, so she shouted, Aren't you going to invite the great Bright Wheel? What are you waiting for? If you want to go back on your word, just say it. Wei Chuanqiu stared at him and said, Little bastard, you will cry. Just you wait. Then she turned into a stream of light and flew toward the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Feng Jiru gave Lan Hao and the others a look. The 4 of them cupped their hands at Yu Qianqiu and said, See you at the life and death mound. They flew away first. Feng Jiru sneered at Yu Qianqiu and flew after them. The surrounding people were in an uproar, and they all flew toward the life and death mound. Yu Qianqiu looked back at the pairs of eyes below and said indifferently, Don't join in the fun. Look after the house. These clowns are not worth mentioning. I will go back after I deal with them. The lords immediately cupped their hands and said, Goodbye, sect master. Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to fly away quickly. Master Ye, Mu Tianjiao, and the others immediately chased after him. The life and death mound was actually a rocky hill at the edge of the fantasy immortal city. It was not small. Rocks of all sizes were scattered all over the place. There were no trees, but there were many tenacious weeds growing in the cracks of the rocks. Some were green, some were withered, and some were yellow. It was a barren land. It could be seen that there had been a fight here from some of the broken rocks. However, it should have been a long time ago. In fact, there had not been a fight in the life and death mound for a long time. The sect masters of various sects were allowed to challenge each other here. However, once it reached this stage, it would almost always end in a fight to the death. Therefore, this place was called the life and death mound. Some people jokingly called it the graveyard of the sect masters. Almost no one would challenge each other unless they had no other choice. This was because the consequence of doing so was not only defeating the other party, but also forming a deep hatred with the other party's entire sect. The gains often did not make up for the losses. Therefore very few people would do this. Now, the life and death mound, which had been barren for God knows how many years, suddenly became lively again. Figures landed around the life and death mound. Even the leaders of the various sects who had not appeared in the World Chamber of Commerce before showed up to watch the show. Feng Jiuru looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had arrived late. To her, Yu Qianqiu's flying speed was not worth mentioning. She turned around and smiled at Lan Hao and the others beside her. Let's not talk about anything else. Just his speed is enough to play him to death. Her disciple Sun Luan smiled. Lan Hao and the others could only awkwardly laugh a few times. Yu Qianqiu looked down. When he saw Feng Jiuru, he landed beside her. Master Ya and the others who had flown with him also landed. The two enemies looked at each other and could not be bothered to look at each other. They silently waited for the witnesses to arrive with their hands behind their backs. After Wan Ling landed and looked around, she accidentally met the eyes of a woman not far away. She immediately smiled and nodded in greeting. This woman was none other than Long Xiaojiu, the granddaughter of Hidden Dragon Villa's elder, Duke Long Yu. Elders Duke Long Yu and Guang Juanru were also present, as well as the latter's grandson, Guang Yanzu. They had originally wanted to go take a look at the World Chamber of Commerce's opening. Coincidentally, Feng Jiuru had sent a warning message. Therefore, like the other sects, they wanted to wait and see, so they did not appear at the World Chamber of Commerce. Now, like the other sects, they had all come to watch the show. Chapter 883. After all, Wan Ling and the others were standing not far from them. In addition, they came together with the attention-grabbing Yu Qianqiu and the others. The people of the Hidden Dragon Manor naturally saw Wan Ling and subconsciously noticed Long Xiaojiu's abnormal behavior. In the entire Hidden Dragon Manor, Guang Yanzu was the only one who did not dislike Wan Ling. If it was not for Wan Ling stealing his love, Long Xiaojiu would have been married a long time ago. She would not have had the chance to marry him. Jiu don't lose your composure and let others laugh at you. Duke Long Yu frowned and transmitted his voice. Guang Juanru sighed softly and turned her head to look elsewhere. Out of sight, out of mind. Long Xiaojiu tried her best to control her emotions. She no longer looked at Wan Ling, who was grinning and showing off her strength. Her gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with Feng Jiuru. She bit her lips and no one knew what she was thinking. Just as everyone was waiting patiently, someone suddenly shouted, "They're here!" Everyone looked in the same direction and saw a green flowing light and a golden flowing light shooting over at an unbelievable speed. In the blink of an eye, they flew over everyone's heads. They had no intention of stopping at the life and death mound and went far away in an instant. Everyone looked at each other. Many of them could tell that the two flowing lights were Wei Chuanqiu and the Great Bright Luan. However, what was strange was that the Great Bright Luan seemed to be chasing after Wei Chuanqiu. In terms of speed, it seemed that Wei Chuanqiu was slightly faster than the Great Bright Luan. Wei Chuanqiu, stop right there. The Great Bright Luan's angry roar came faintly from afar. What happened? While everyone was confused and shocked, they saw a green and golden flowing light make a turn in the distant sky and fly back here. It was also at this moment that white crescent moons suddenly burst out from the golden light chasing after it. They circled around and strangled the green light with a thunderous momentum. More than a dozen moons drew strange arcs in the air as they chased after the green light that was rapidly escaping. Great Bright Luan, you actually played for real. Wei Chuanqiu's exasperated voice came from the sky. The two of them flew to the sky above the life and death mound once again. The green light that Wei Chuanqiu had transformed into did not seem to want to escape anymore. In an instant, the green flowing light flashed with a dazzling speed and created countless flowing light mirages. It shuttled back and forth and dodged the dozens of thunderous moon wheels. That miraculous speed of dodging caused everyone to gasp, and all of them sighed in their hearts. As expected of the Azure Wing Bat King that was skilled in speed in the immortal dimension. If it was any other person, that person would have probably perished beneath the lunar wheel that possessed shocking might. After a series of twists and turns, the dodging green light in the air found a gap and quickly teleported away. By the time everyone found Wei Chuanqiu, she was already hiding behind Mu Tianjiao, her clothes in a mess. She was wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. Wu Xiong's wife, on account that Yu Qianqiu is your friend, quickly tell this madman to stop. Mu Tianjiao looked at him speechlessly. She also knew her own limits. How could she have the qualifications to order around the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's great bright wheel? She really could not ask for this favor. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so powerful full moon discs came crashing down with a thunderous momentum, scaring the people down below. Just as they were about to flee, the full moon discs suddenly stopped and quickly bounced back into the sky. However, the powerful pressure that came with it just now still forced many people to stagger. The rocks under their feet were sent flying everywhere. Even after he stopped, the momentum was still astonishing. With a flash of golden light, the great bright wheel appeared in the sky. It converged into dozens of white lunar wheels and drilled into his arms. The great bright wheel glared at Wei Chuanxiu below with murderous eyes. If it was not for Mu Tianjiao, it would not care how many people were standing below and whether it would hurt the innocent. It would have already killed them all in one fell swoop. Wu Xiong's wife still has a lot of face. Wei Chuanxiu cupped his hands towards Mu Tianjiao to express his gratitude. He then laughed at the great bright wheel in the sky. Great bright wheel, I knew you would give Wu Xiong face and not lay a hand on his woman. You bastard, so many years have passed and you're still so useless. What kind of ability is it to rely on a woman to protect your life? The great bright wheel pointed at him and shouted angrily. If you have the ability, come out and see if I don't skin you alive, you bat. Everyone could see that Wei Chuanxiu was definitely up to no good and had angered the great bright wheel. Otherwise, the great bright wheel would not have personally chased after him. From their words, it could be heard that the two of them had known each other for many years. Previously, when Wei Chuanxiu was able to invite the great bright wheel to the Chamber of Commerce, many people had this guess. However, they were still fine last time. How did they fall out this time? Some of the elders in the immortal world might know that Wei Chuanxiu, Yun Peng, and the Great Bright Wheel were inseparable friends. Later, the three of them were noticed by the Immortal Palace and wanted to recruit them into the Immortal Palace. It was also because of this that the three of them had a disagreement and parted on bad terms. In the end, the Great Bright Wheel joined the Immortal Palace while Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng continued to roam freely in the immortal world, not wanting to be bound by others. What everyone did not know was that Wei Chuanxiu was able to invite the Great Bright Wheel to the Chamber of Commerce because of their past relationship. Otherwise, how could a normal person invite the powerful Great Bright Wheel? However, what made the Great Bright Wheel unhappy was that not long after he returned to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, Wei Chuanxiu came to ask him to be some bullshit witness, which he immediately rejected. Wei Chuanxiu begged a few times to no avail and was a little angry. He could not help but kick the Great Bright Wheels which made the Great Bright Wheel fly into a rage and the two of them immediately fought. This fight almost caused the experts of the entire Chamber of Commerce Alliance to surround and attack Wei Chuanxiu. Fortunately, the Great Bright Wheel remembered their past relationship and did not let others interfere. After they started fighting, Wei Chuanxiu could not help but be convinced that, just like before, he was still no match for the Great Bright Wheel. He could only take a beating and had no choice but to escape. Due to his talent, although Wei Chuanxiu was no match for the Great Bright Wheel, he was faster, which led to the scene everyone saw. What are you arguing about? Do you think I like to see your stinky face? Wei Chuanxiu pointed at Mu Tianjiao indignantly and said, if it wasn't for Wu Xiong's friend asking me to invite you, who the hell would go find you? When he said this, Mu Tianjiao stared at Wei Chuanxiu, dumbfounded, as if asking what did this have to do with her. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched and he touched his forehead weakly. He had to admit that this old bat was even more shameless than him. Everyone looked at Wei Chuanxiu speechlessly and could not help but admire this guy. Only he dared to talk to the Great Bright Wheel's owner like this. The Great Bright Wheel was startled when he heard this. He looked at Mu Tianjiao and immediately reacted. He was almost confused by Wei Chuanxiu's words. It was so complicated, but it had nothing to do with Mu Tianjiao at all. It was nothing more than Yu Qianqiu asking him to invite him. Shameless guy. Get out here. The Great Bright Wheel roared angrily. Wei Chuanxiu laughed and could not be bothered with him. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, I have already invited the person for you. As for whether he agrees or not, it is not something I can control. You guys do as you see fit. After saying this, he tidied up his messy hair and clothes. Damn it. What an old scoundrel. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze, but now was not the time to argue with the old bat. He immediately turned to Feng Jiuru and sneered, the Great Bright Wheel's owner has come as you wish. If you have something to say it quickly. He then flew directly to the center of the rocky hill. Chapter 884. This barren rocky hill was jokingly called the sect leader's graveyard. Who knew how many sect leaders had lost their lives here? The past had become history and the fallen could not be resurrected. Only the luxuriant weeds stubbornly took root here, giving this place some life. Very few sect leaders would come to this ominous place. But after many years, the story of this place was about to repeat itself. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly on a relatively flat rock, staring calmly at Feng Jiuru and the others. Suddenly, the wind became stronger and the weeds between the rocks began to sway. They seemed to have sensed something, and the withered weeds flew into the air, and no one knew where they would land. Under Feng Jiuru's secret, almost frantic urging, Lan Hao and the others had no other choice. But before they came, the estrangement caused by the fight for sect leader had been resolved. They knew that even if they won, the experts of the World Commerce Association would not let them return safely to the 4 islands of Lake Light. But they had no choice. Feng Jiuru would not let them return safely either. Furthermore, she had threatened them with their families. Thus they made an agreement among themselves. If any of the 4 of them were lucky enough to return, they would take the tokens of the sect masters of the 4 islands and restore the 4 islands to a single sect. At the same time, they would also entrust their families to them. Although the World Commerce Association allowed the sect leaders to challenge each other here, they did not allow a group fight. In other words, each challenge could only be one-on-one. Bao Tuxing flashed out from among the 4. He floated in the air and looked down. Yu Qianqiu also looked up and their gazes met. The former's gaze was indifferent. He clearly did not think it would be difficult to defeat Yu Qianqiu. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. In fact, Yu Qianqiu knew that as long as he was vigilant, he could escape at any time and no one could catch him. But he also knew what today's battle meant. This was a hurdle for the World Commerce Association. If he escaped, it would be equivalent to losing and the territory he had painstakingly built would be handed over to someone else. This was something he would never allow, so he would never run away from today's battle unless it was absolutely necessary. Since he accepted the challenge, he had to win. There were more than 300 pairs of eyes watching him from behind. As the #1 expert in the world, he could not disappoint them. At the same time, he recalled the scene when he parted ways with Bai Changchun in front of the gate to the underworld. He had promised Bai Changchun that he would not let him down. Yu Qianqiu's clothes were fluttering in the wind. Suddenly, Du Karen's voice resounded in his ears. Yu Qianqiu, be careful. The people of the 4 islands of Lake Light are proficient in the art of controlling water. Although I've never met them before, I'm sure they must have some tricks up their sleeves. Water manipulation technique? Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that his chances of winning had increased by a few notches. He shouted towards the sky, "Come!" Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes immediately focused on it without blinking. She seemed a little nervous. De Ming Luan tilted his head slightly to look at him. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with confusion. When Bao Tuxing saw that Yu Qianqiu did not have anything in his hands and was fighting him with his bare fists, his hand that was reaching for his storage bracelet stopped. He said indifferently, "The difference between our cultivations is too big. I'll let you make the first move." His words sounded as if he wanted Yu Qianqiu to accept his defeat wholeheartedly. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He did not say anything else. He knew that he could not be careless when fighting with such an opponent. If he was hit by the opponent, he could lose his life. He estimated the distance between them. It was a few hundred meters. With his current cultivation, he could only lock onto an opponent within 50 meters. Even if the opponent broke into his range, if the opponent was too vigilant and dodged too quickly, he would not be able to lock onto the opponent in time. In that case, he would not be able to find a chance to use the Absorbing Star's great technique. The difference between their cultivations was too big. Sneak attack was still the best way. Yu Qianqiu gradually clenched his fists. His perception surged into the ground from under his feet like a tide and quickly spread to the surroundings. With his current cultivation, he was still unable to use his perception in the air. He needed a medium to transmit his perception. However, the vast ground was his best medium. Everyone could tell from the minute changes in Yu Qianqiu's body that he was about to make a move. As he slowly spread his arms, everyone felt as if the ground was trembling along with his arms. When everyone clearly saw that the rocks on the rocky hill were shaking, they were immediately shocked. This scene was too shocking. Anyone who saw a large area of rocks vibrating would be shocked. How could this be? Everyone was in disbelief. It was as if Yu Qianqiu's movement and frown had already affected the entire rocky hill. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation had already reached such a high level? This was not something a soul formation stage cultivator could do. Could it be that he was deliberately hiding his cultivation? No wonder he dared to challenge the Heartless Palace. Wei Chuanxiu was stunned. Then he excitedly rubbed his hands. This guy really had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. The great bright wheel was still calm. However, his attention was completely focused on Yu Qianqiu. Bao Tuxing, who was in the air, immediately raised his guard. Under everyone's gaze, he had already said that he would let Yu Qianqiu make the first move. He couldn't go back on his word. Suddenly his pupils shrank. He saw Yu Qianqiu shake his arms. A dense gray shadow suddenly shot out from the rocks that covered the mountain. They formed into a group with Yu Qianqiu as the center and quickly circled around him. Everyone was dumbstruck. It was actually tens of thousands of stone flying swords. Within the dense gray shadow, Yu Qianqiu suddenly pointed his arm at Bao Tuxing and shouted, 10,000 flying swords. So, the sound of the air being pierced could be heard. The dense gray shadow shot towards Bao Tuxing in an astonishing amount. Regardless of how powerful it was, the scene was truly spectacular. Bao Tuxing quickly waved his palms left and right, releasing rays of multicolored light, immediately shattering the stone flying swords that were rushing towards him. After exchanging a few blows, he discovered that although the stone flying swords that filled the sky looked astonishing, they were actually unable to withstand a single blow. He immediately snorted coldly, I thought it was some kind of powerful move, so it's just a show. Now it's my turn. His body turned into a silver stream of light in the air, and actually broke through the stone flying swords that were attacking him. He rushed towards Yu Qianqiu, and the hundreds and thousands of stone flying swords were unable to obstruct him at all. Such a small distance was covered in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled into a cold smile. The qi that he had set up in the air directly wrapped around Bao Tuxing, who had rushed down. He opened his claw in the air and exhaled, star-absorbing great technique. As soon as these words came out, Wan Ling, who had been watching quietly, felt her eyelids twitch. The scene of Tsang Lianxing and Chai Junlang's tragic deaths immediately appeared in her mind. Du Feng and the others, who had seen this move in the ruins of God, also watched the outcome with their mouths wide open. A cloud of white smoke suddenly burst out of the silver flowing light that was diving down at high speed, and a horrifying figure that looked like a mummy appeared. It let out a shrill howl of horror from its throat, waving its stiff limbs and desperately trying to flee for its life. However, his current speed was worlds apart from before. He wasn't much faster than the birds in the sky. Fancy? Then I'll show you how powerful I am. Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly, facing the empty air with his 5 claws. He formed a sword technique with 2 fingers, and pointed at the corpse that was fleeing in the air. The area around Yu Qianqiu immediately exploded like a series of cannons, and streaks of green light shot out from the stones on the ground, soaring into the sky. Over 100 streaks of green light quickly caught up to the fleeing corpse. With a burst of green light, it was turned into a hornet's nest in an instant. With a crisp dang sound in the air, a storage bracelet was bounced by a green stream of light. Yu Qianqiu, who had one hand behind his back and one hand in the air, happened to grab it. Without even looking at it, he directly put it away. Almost at the same time, the hundreds of cyan streams of light returned to where they came from. With a series of ping-ping sounds, they surrounded Yu Qianqiu and shot into the ground, disappearing without a trace, leaving only smoke and dust floating in the air. Yu Qianqiu placed his hands behind his back and watched the corpse in the air fall to the ground indifferently. The stone flying swords that were still circling in the air adjusted their direction, and with a shwa-shwa sound, thousands of gray shadows shot down, and in the blink of an eye, all of them stabbed into the surroundings of Yu Qianqiu. The surging smoke gradually drifted away, and Yu Qianqiu's figure appeared in everyone's line of sight again. From beginning to end, Yu Qianqiu stood on the stone and didn't move at all. Among the tens of thousands of stone swords, he looked back, stared at Feng Jiuru and said indifferently, "Next." The unshakable momentum of the wind and clouds was not weaker than that of a grandmaster of a generation. Feng Jiuru was inexplicably frightened by his gaze and everyone was stunned. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu's methods would be so terrifying. Although the momentum of the tens of thousands of swords was terrifying, it was still not comparable to the palm that could directly turn Bao Tuxing into a dried corpse. If that palm was aimed at them, everyone shuddered at the thought of it. It was too terrifying. After Master Ye's generation recovered from the shock, they all looked at Shui Mingqing's generation with questioning eyes. Shui Mingqing and the others nodded slightly, indicating that this was the star-absorbing great technique that Yu Qianqiu had used to kill the disciples of Heartless Palace in the ruins of God. However, when a few elders secretly asked a few juniors about the 10,000 swords, They all expressed that they didn't know. This was the first time they had seen Yu Qianqiu use it. Although Wei Chuanqiu had been with Yu Qianqiu for a long time, it was the first time she had seen Yu Qianqiu use such a terrifying star-absorbing great technique. When she thought about how this guy had so many powerful killing moves hidden on him, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. Wei Chuanqiu, what is going on between you and this Yu Qianqiu? The Great Bright Will calmly asked. What do you mean what is going on? Wei Chuanqiu came back to his senses and asked in confusion. The Great Bright Will slowly turned his head to look at him, and with a cold gaze, he said word by word, "Don't play dumb with me. Didn't you remember anything from Yu Qianqiu's 10,000 swords? It seems that I need to remind you. Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. Chapter 885. Wei Chuanqiu was startled, and immediately thought of the demon monarch who terrorized both the immortal and netherworld. At that time, his cultivation was still shallow, and he did not have the qualifications to intervene in the war. However, he had witnessed the scene of the battle, and he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of it. Looking at Yu Qianqiu standing in the midst of the swords and smiling coldly, the scene of the swords just now did indeed give people a sense of déjà vu. This scene seemed to have been seen by the demon monarch who rode on the divine dragon. This matter can be big or small. You better explain it clearly or else it will not benefit either of us, especially you and Yun Peng. De Ming Luan warned him. Wei Chuanqiu looked at him and replied sarcastically, what do you mean by big or small? You can't be suspecting that Yu Qianqiu is related to the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, right? Didn't the demon monarch of 10,000 swords already die in the hands of Jin Tai? What nonsense are you thinking about? I cannot think too much, but can you guarantee that the immortal emperor will not think too much? De Ming Luan snorted and said, the demon monarch of 10,000 swords is the only one who can threaten him after the seal of the demon realm. Today the scene of Yu Qianqiu controlling the swords will reach his ears sooner or later. As the person involved and the person in charge of this place, he will call me for questioning sooner or later. If I can't give him an explanation that will make him feel at ease, you and Yun Peng should prepare to be buried with Yu Qianqiu. I'm afraid I will not be able to absolve myself from the blame. Wei Chuanqiu fell into a short silence. He knew that what De Ming Luan said was the truth. Jin Tai was a ruthless and arrogant person, and would definitely not allow anyone who could threaten his rule to exist. If he did not have a reason to feel at ease, it would indeed be a big problem. He paused and said, I also can't explain this matter clearly, let's ask him after this matter is over. At this moment the remaining 3 people from the 4 islands of Lake Light suddenly quarreled, and immediately stopped the conversation between the two. This attracted everyone's attention. Everyone thought that they were afraid of death and pushing the blame to each other. When everyone heard the content of their conversation, they all sighed with emotion. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. If you still recognize me as your eldest senior brother, then listen to me. Following Lan Hao's angry shout, Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan lowered their heads in grief and indignation. Lan Hao extended his hand and pulled over the items that the two of them were holding. One was a silvery raincoat with a bamboo hat, and the other was a fishing net. Those who didn't know would think that they were fishing tools used by fishermen, but in fact they were 2 of the 4 treasures of the 4 islands of Lake Light. The 4 disciples each took one of the 4 treasures, a gourd, a straw cape, a fishing net, and a fishing rod. The fishing rod was in Bao Tuxing's hands, but because he had underestimated his opponent, he was killed before he could take out his treasures. The storage bracelet with the treasures also fell into Yu Qianqiu's hands. Eldest senior brother. Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan suddenly shouted at the same time. Their voices were a bit low. After looking at each other, the 2 of them took the 2 items from Lan Hao's hands. Su Yuchang shook open the straw cape and personally put it on Lan Hao. Ning Zixuan used a special method to wrap the fishing net around Lan Hao's arm. I think Master will be very happy to see us like this. Lan Hao laughed heartily. Then he also took out a large gray gourd from his storage bracelet and tied it to his waist. This meant that he had 3 of the 4 treasures on him. The reason why they made such a grand scene was because the way Yu Qianqiu killed Bao Tuxing was too shocking. Bao Tuxing didn't even have a chance to resist before the outcome was decided. At this moment, in the eyes of the 3 disciples, Yu Qianqiu was definitely an expert who had hidden his cultivation. Otherwise, how could a soul formation stage cultivator be so powerful? In fact, they weren't the only ones who thought this way. Many of the onlookers thought the same because no one could see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. When the rabbit dies, the fox grieves, and the disciples let go of their previous enmity, so they all took out their treasures and focused them on one person. They felt that this was the only way they could defeat Yu Qianqiu. Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan's eyes were filled with grief and helplessness as they watched Lan Hao fly over the life and death mound. In fact, the one who was the most worried and afraid was Feng Juru. She never thought that Yu Qianqiu would be so powerful that he could kill Bao Tuxing so easily. If all the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light were defeated, then she would be in trouble. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but sneak a glance at the Great Bright Wheel who was supervising the battle. Coincidentally, the Great Bright Wheel's cold gaze swept over, causing her to immediately turn around in a panic. Seeing Lan Hao in such a strange outfit, Yu Qianqiu immediately raised his guard. He didn't even need to think about it to know that Lan Hao was definitely wearing treasures. Otherwise, the disciples wouldn't have to dress so solemnly. "Junior brother, I'll take revenge for you," Lan Hao roared. He grabbed the big gourd at his waist with one arm and pulled out the stopper of the big gourd with the other. Then he slapped the gourd and a column of water shot out from the mouth of the gourd. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed. When the column of water came out of the gourd, it was only a thin stream of water. Who knew that it would suddenly become bigger after a short distance? The water waves were like a torrential river that poured down from the sky with a rumbling sound. What made Yu Qianqiu feel strange was that the torrential waves released from the gourd did not come for him. Instead, they were like a huge water dragon that wriggled in all directions. "Yu Qianqiu, this is the water gourd of the 4 treasures of Lake Light. He's setting up the heavenly water formation. You can kill him while he's setting up the formation." Huo Lianqing of the mythical fire palace was also secretly playing the good guy. Hearing him say it so easily, as if killing a late-stage ascendant immortal cultivator was really as easy as cutting vegetables, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He was the clearest about his own strength. As long as he left the ground, he would immediately fall into a passive situation. The attack speed that he could display with his cultivation was simply not enough to catch the opponent's eyes. Even if he used his purple flames and divine sword, he probably wouldn't even be able to touch the opponent, let alone kill him. Sneak attacks when the opponent was unprepared was the way to go. Most importantly, being in the air meant that the attack range was wider, while being on the ground meant that there was more room for maneuver. At the very least, he could escape underground. He calmly watched the opponent set up the formation. In the eyes of others, they thought that he had a card up his sleeve. Who knew that he was doing this because he had no other choice? In a short while, the water dragon had entrenched itself into a huge water cube that occupied an extremely large area. The strange thing was that it did not collapse. The area within a radius of several miles had already become a vast body of water. The rocky hills were completely submerged. The onlookers had already risen into the air to watch. Everyone could vaguely see that Yu Qianqiu was still standing motionlessly at the bottom of the water. At this moment, the water gourd in Lan Hao's hand had also stopped pouring water down. Just a slight movement of the gourd would cause the waves below to surge. Clearly, it could draw in the water cube below. A cold smile appeared on Lan Hao's face. Since the opponent was so arrogant, it was obvious that he did not know the power of his water sky formation. Then, as if he was hugging a waste drum, he used his other hand to continuously slap the body of the gourd. 2 huge waves immediately surged up from the surging waves below, condensing into 2 huge fists. They opened their palms and aimed at Yu Qianqiu at the bottom of the water. With a loud bang, they broke through the waves and grabbed at him. At first, Yu Qianqiu was a little worried. However, after staying in the water for a while, he discovered that it was only SOSO. Although this part of the water seemed to be controlled by something, it seemed that his control over the water art was stronger. When he discovered that the opponent was actually controlling the water to deal with him, he was immediately speechless. He was really displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. He actually dared to play with water in front of me. Then let's play. The undercurrent carried a huge pressure as it approached. He could clearly see the 2 huge dark blue hands grabbing at him. Yu Qianqiu waved his large sleeves. The 2 huge hands instantly collapsed and disappeared, merging into the water. The water gourd in his hand trembled and instantly lost contact with the 2 huge hands. Lan Hao was immediately shocked. In this heavenly water formation, the gourd in his hand was the master of this part of the water. The 2 huge hands that were condensed were not afraid of being damaged at all. This was because this part of the water could repair them at any time and then continue to attack the opponent. As long as the opponent's cultivation was not ridiculously high, being trapped in the formation was equivalent to being trapped in an endless entanglement. However, the opponent just waved his hand casually and immediately and silently broke his spell. This was a little too inconceivable. Could it be that his cultivation had reached an unimaginably terrifying level? Everyone who witnessed the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although most of them didn't know much about the power of the heavenly water array, they could tell from Lan Hao's shocked expression that something must have happened that shocked him. Everyone could also see some clues from the sudden change in Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang's expressions. Lan Hao loosened his grip on the gourd and hung it back on his waist. He understood in his heart that since the opponent had dealt with it so easily, it would be useless to use water again. His figure flashed and like a meteor, he drilled into the water below with a bang. The straw cape on his body flashed with a white light, and his entire person disappeared on the spot. This time, it was immediately Yu Qianqiu's turn to be nervous. He quickly looked around but he could not see the opponent's figure at all. This was a little too terrifying. His perception immediately surged out like a tide and spread out. This part of the water immediately became a part of his body. *CK. He could actually become invisible. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He instantly discovered the opponent's position, but he could not see him at all. What shocked him the most was that when his perception swept over the other party's body, it felt as if there was nothing there, as if the other party didn't exist at all. If it wasn't for the fact that he had complete control over this region of water, he wouldn't be able to hide anything from him. He would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the straw cape on the opponent's body. There must be something strange about this straw cape. After Lan Hao drilled into the water, he immediately held his breath and stealthily hid for a while. Although he was very confident in the treasured clothes on his body, he now treated Yu Qianqiu as a real expert. He did not dare to relax at all. After waiting for a while, he carefully and slowly approached. He did not dare to cause any changes in the water. He was prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Yu Qianqiu was immediately speechless. He did not expect that there would be such a shameless person. He actually dared to play a sneak attack on him in the water. He simply continued to pretend to look around blankly. More than 10 purple flame-flying swords quietly burrowed into the ground under his feet. He was also prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Chapter 886. Both of them were prepared for a sneak attack. One was sneaky while the other pretended not to know. They got closer and closer to each other. Lan Hao had a water splitter in his hand, which he hid under his straw cape. Because of the ripples in the water, everyone could not see clearly, but they could vaguely see Yu Qianqiu looking around blankly. Most people did not know what was going on behind the temporary calm. Only Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang knew the danger. They knew that their eldest senior brother was using his straw cape to hide himself, and was definitely approaching quietly to prepare a sneak attack. Their hearts were in their throats, hoping that their eldest senior brother would succeed in one strike. When the distance between the two of them was less than 200 meters, Yu Qianqiu could already feel Lan Hao slowly taking out his weapon. It was obvious that he was ready to attack. He could not help but curse in his heart. He wanted to wait for his opponent to get closer and see if he could use the Absorbing Star's great skill in the water. That way his chances of winning would be higher. Lan Hao was worried that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too high, so he did not dare to get too close. He quietly stopped and was about to make a sneak attack when he suddenly heard a piu-piu sound coming from below. Before he had time to check, the water curtain in front of him had already flashed with purple light. At the same time, Lan Hao saw a trace of an evil smile hanging on the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth. He was immediately shocked. His reaction was considered fast, and he immediately guessed that he had fallen into a trap. He did not care about anything else and desperately used teleportation to escape. A dark red halo of blood spread in the water, and a hua sound rose from the surface of the water. A white light flashed and Lan Hao appeared, quickly catapulting into the air. He held the water splitter in one hand and with the other hand he took out a pill and crushed it. He applied it to the wound on his thigh and immediately stopped the blood flow. The onlookers did not see clearly what had happened. They only saw a flash of purple light under the water, and Lan Hao immediately ran for his life and was injured. Yu Qianqiu had already kept the purple flame-flying sword. He had always insisted on not exposing this thing as much as possible. It would be troublesome if someone recognized it as the purple flame. This sneak attack made Yu Qianqiu feel that it was a pity. He didn't expect that the other party would still be able to escape. Although the other party had kicked him in the leg for an immortal cultivator, it probably wasn't a big deal. The key thing was that the other party didn't hurt his vital parts. However, this also made Yu Qianqiu realize that his judgment was correct. Based on the opponent's cultivation and reaction speed, it would be difficult for him to hurt him. If he had followed up with a purple flame berserk explosion after injuring his opponent, he should have been able to finish him off. However, if he had done that, the chances of his purple flames being recognized would have greatly increased. This was a risk that was not easy to take. At that moment, Lan Hao, who was floating in the air, had a look of bewilderment on his face. He did not expect to be discovered by the other party even though he was wearing the invisibility cloak. This undoubtedly proved that the other party's cultivation base was very high. But the strange thing was that the speed of the purple flying swords that attacked him just now was a bit slow. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to react at such a close distance. How could the speed of the flying swords with such high cultivation be so slow? Could it be that the other party intended to let him go? That was not possible. Since he couldn't figure it out, he simply didn't want to think about it. At this point, he already had no way out. Even if he didn't want to fight, he had to fight. Lan Hao's left arm shook, and the fishing net that was wrapped around his arm burst out with a multicolored light. Like thousands of strands, it expanded and stretched infinitely. With a schwa sound, it scattered into the water below. Yu Qianqiu almost didn't have time to react. He found himself surrounded by a rapidly pouncing net that was rapidly shrinking towards him. Without saying anything further, he directly burrowed into the ground and emerged from the periphery of the net that was surrounding him. Looking back, he saw that the large rock that he had just landed on had been shredded into pieces by the dense, silk-like fishing net. Yu Qianqiu was shocked on the spot. He didn't know what this thin net was made of. It was actually so sharp that it could cut through rocks like tofu. If he had been careless just now, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Lan Hao, who was in the air, could see the situation underwater more clearly than anyone else. Furthermore, this area of water was connected to the treasured gourd, so he could clearly sense the changes in the water through the gourd. Otherwise, he might have injured more than one leg when he was running for his life just now. However, once he saw it clearly, he was shocked. He had seen people burrow into the ground, but he had never seen someone burrow into a rock. He thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him, but reality was reality. The net that he had cast did not catch the other party at all. The fishing net that had retracted after a single strike quickly exploded into thousands of strands again and burrowed into the water. In the blink of an eye, it had once again enveloped Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a toothache. This thing's ejection speed was really fast. To be honest, it wouldn't take him much effort to break this net. However, it would be a pity to destroy such a miraculous treasure. Left with no choice, he resisted the urge to burrow into the rubble to hide. As soon as he dove into the rubble, Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. His opponent had played with him to the extreme. This net had actually sunk more than 10 meters into the ground. Even the person in the rock were wrapped up like a dumpling. They were coming at him from all directions. The holes in the net were also very small, so it was impossible to burrow through even if he wanted to. Damn it. I don't care about this stupid net. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. Just as the fishing net was about to wrap around him, a purple light exploded from his body, and the fishing net that was coming at him was instantly reduced to nothingness. Lan Hao immediately sensed that the treasure had been damaged. In a great shock, he hurriedly retracted his net. However, he saw that the rapidly retracting fishing net had wrapped around a rock. What surprised him even more was that Yu Qianqiu had already surfaced from the water and was staring at him coldly. Eldest senior brother, be careful. Ning Zixuan and Su Yuchang cried out in alarm. Following that, there was an uproar from the crowd. Lan Hao, who had been vigilant against Yu Qianqiu, slowly lowered his head. He looked at his chest in disbelief. There was a purple flying sword stuck in his chest. After the flying sword shot out from the rock that was dragged back by the fishing net, the rock broke into pieces and fell to the ground. The flying sword had been hidden in the rock when it was brought back. Because Yu Qianqiu had suddenly appeared on the water surface, Lan Hao's attention was immediately diverted from the rock. That was why he was in such a predicament. Otherwise, there was still a chance that he could have avoided it. At this moment, Lan Hao suddenly felt a burst of heat from the flying sword stuck in his chest. In an instant, his heart was turned into ashes. Lan Hao could not suppress the burning pain in his heart. His blood qi surged and he spat out a large lump of viscous blood. His eyes were wide open as he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and stuttered, "You cheated, shameless?" His body was already swaying in the air, and it looked like he could not stand any longer. "I'm not cheating, I'm just playing with you." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "Instead of being a good sect master, you listen to that old dog's instigation and go against me. You should know that killing you is a piece of cake. If I didn't want to play with you, how could you have lived until now?" After he finished speaking as if to prove his words, Yu Qianqiu landed lightly on the water surface. The moment his feet touched the water surface, a pure white frost immediately condensed on the water surface. Ka-ka, the sound of ice rapidly forming rang out. Starting from under Yu Qianqiu's feet, the pure white frost quickly spread in all directions. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly, as if the last bit of warmth that existed in this world had disappeared, leaving behind only a bone-piercing cold. In just a moment, the water cube that was surging with waves just a moment ago had already turned into a huge block of ice. A huge block of ice that took up a radius of several miles. Although the sun was blazing in the sky, the surrounding temperature was frighteningly low. The change in temperature was so huge that even these immortal cultivators could not help but shiver. Looking at the world of ice in front of them, everyone could not help but let out a breath of cold air. Each and every one of them was dumbfounded, almost thinking that it was an illusion. Yu Qianqiu stood on the crystal-clear ice surface. On the surface he looked calm, but in his heart he was secretly rejoicing that it was just right. This was already the limit of his current cultivation, that he could turn water into ice. What surprised him the most was that when he was absorbing the surrounding temperature just now, he could faintly feel the existence of a weak purple fire element in the air. This made him fall into deep thought. Since the purple fire was the energy that supported the operation of this world, could it be that the reason why he could not see it normally was because the purple fire existed in a scattered form throughout this world? Lan Hao, whose heart meridians had been destroyed, finally could not hold on any longer. A bitter smile appeared on his face. He now believed that Yu Qianqiu was indeed playing with him. Otherwise, he would have turned the water into ice from the very beginning, and he would not have been able to play with the water at all. The difference in strength between the two of them was too great. Lan Hao closed his eyes, tilted his head, and fell straight down, smashing into the thick ice with a bang. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and the purple fire flying sword stuck in Lan Hao's chest flew back into his sleeve. Then he slowly walked over and put away the treasures and storage bracelet on Lan Hao's body. The surrounding crowd also landed on the huge block of ice. Many of them even squatted down to touch it, and found that it was indeed a solid block of ice. It was definitely not an illusion. There were still 3 people floating in the air. Feng Jiru's face turned pale, and now she finally believed that she had done a stupid thing. Ning Zixuan and Su Yuchang watched helplessly as Yu Qianqiu took away their eldest senior brother's belongings. The two of them almost simultaneously cast resentful gazes at Feng Jiru. If it weren't for her, they wouldn't have ended up like this. The two of them looked at each other, nodded, and then shouted in unison, "We admit defeat." After that, they immediately fled together. Feng Jiru was shocked as if she had been struck by lightning. She suddenly turned around and shouted anxiously, "Stop! It's not over yet, stop!" Seeing that she could not stop the two of them, she immediately turned into a blue light and chased after them. However, a moon suddenly appeared in the sky and directly bounced the blue light back. "Feng Jiru, do you think I'm just a decoration? If you want to leave, fulfill your bet first." The voice of the great bright wheel sounded in the sky. The blue light appeared, and Feng Jiru immediately cupped her hands toward the great bright wheel standing on the ice and pleaded, "Master! It's not over yet, the two of them haven't finished yet, I'll call them back now." The great bright wheel appeared in the sky in an instant, and with a wave of his hand, the moon retracted into his sleeve. Then he put his hands on his abdomen and said indifferently, "They have already admitted defeat, what else is there to compete for?" Chapter 887. I have a way to persuade them to come back. Continue. I will get them back now. Feng Jiru retreated in fear. The great bright wheel's eyes suddenly opened and said in a calm tone, "Are you joking with me?" No. I will get them back now." Feng Jiru said and turned to fly away. The great bright wheel snorted coldly and revealed its palms that were hidden in its sleeves. 10 light balls shot out from its 10 fingers and chased after Feng Jiru in an instant. Feng Jiru turned around to look, and she was instantly scared out of her wits. She cried out in alarm, "Please, for the sake of the Heartless Palace." Before she could finish her words, the 10 balls of light suddenly turned into 10 huge crescent moons, weaving a net to entangle them. Feng Jiru knew it was too late to say anything. The great bright wheel was ready to kill her, so she quickly changed her position in the air. However, the 10 moons followed her like a shadow and she could not get rid of them. Feng Jiru, who was struggling to deal with them, made up her mind and summoned her flying sword to fight back. The great bright wheel's eyes flashed fiercely and it shouted, "How dare you? How dare you resist?" He swung his palm in the air, and the 10 crescent moons suddenly appeared like illusions. They cut through the void, leaving silver arcs in the air. The power of the thunderbolt made people feel as if they were looking at a bolt from the blue. At this moment, a shrill scream rang out in the air, and a cloud of blood mist exploded in the air. 10 ghost-like crescent moons darted out of the blood mist and turned into 10 light balls. The great bright wheel waved his long sleeve and collected the light balls. He didn't stop at all. Leaving behind a cold snort, he turned into a golden light and disappeared into the distance. This scene caused everyone to go silent like cicadas in the winter. Especially the expressions of the elders of the various sects that held down the fort here. They'd never imagined that the damning wheel would actually be so formidable, and it would kill Feng Jiuru in a fit of rage in an instant. In comparison, killing the elders was not a problem. The terror of the great bright wheel suddenly pressed down on everyone's hearts like a mountain. Even Wei Chuanqiu was slightly absent-minded. He was immersed in the demonic transformations of the 10 full moons. Putting himself in Wei Chuanqiu's shoes, he realized that it was actually difficult for him to resolve it with his own movement techniques. Only now did he understand that De Ming Luen had shown mercy when it attacked him. Otherwise he would have been in deep trouble. Before the pieces of flesh and blood in the air could fall to the ground, Yu Qianqiu immediately dashed over. He caught one of the storage bracelets with his sharp eyes and sharp hands. After inspecting it with his divine sense, he nearly laughed out loud. Huang Xiaolong noticed that Feng Jiuru was indeed worthy of being an elder of the number 1 force in the immortal world. Just the divine grade spirit stones alone numbered more than 7 billion. Huang Xiaolong wondered if these were the public funds of the Heartless Palace. However, this was not something that Yu Qianqiu was worried about. He only thought of it as his spoils of war. He looked around in satisfaction, then without another word, he quickly flew towards the World Commerce Association. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up when he came back to his senses. Seeing Yu Qianqiu running away so quickly after winning the battle, he thought he must have made a fortune. He immediately chased after him. The two of them landed in front of the World Commerce Association's building. When the lords saw that Yu Qianqiu had returned, they were all extremely excited. Since the torture master had returned unscathed, they reckoned that they had definitely won. What's in Feng Jiuru's storage bracelets? Wei Chuanqiu eagerly followed behind Yu Qianqiu, tugging on his sleeve as he asked. Yu Qianqiu flung his sleeve and strode inside saying, "I told you it's nothing, I've told you many times." That can't be. Feng Jiuru is in charge of the Heartless Palace's branch here. No matter how few things he has, it can't be that little. Wei Chuanqiu expressed his doubt as he chased after Huang Xiaolong. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him. He quickly walked into the main hall and stepped onto the curved platform at the edge of the pool. He turned around and shouted to the crowd, "The trouble has been resolved for now. Keep your spirits up, I believe there will be guests coming soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the feudal lords cheered excitedly. They weren't stupid, they knew that after this matter, they had at least gained a foothold in the immortal world. On the large ice layer of the life and death mound, the spectators left one after another. Soon after, more people came after hearing the news. This barren land that had always been uninhabited suddenly became lively. After a whole month, the huge ice layer finally disappeared from everyone's sight. During this time, countless people from the immortal world had come to visit. Although the opening of the World Commerce Company caused quite a few twists and turns, it became even more lively because of this. Yu Qianqiu put on his big red robe again and welcomed guests with a smiling face in the main hall. This time the people who came from various sects were much more polite to him. When they saw him walking over, they greeted him with some reverence. This was the embodiment of strength. Only with strength could he gain everyone's recognition. This was something that needed no doubt. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu became unfathomable in everyone's eyes. No one could see through his cultivation, but based on the fact that he could easily kill 2 late-stage immortal sect masters, everyone guessed that his cultivation had at least reached the great immortal level. However, everyone was clear that this time, the World Commerce Company had formed a great enmity with the Heartless Palace. They were afraid that they wouldn't have an easy time in the future. However, the various sects that came to support the opening were still shocked by the large variety of immortal herbs that the World Commerce Company was selling. Hence, people kept making roundabout inquiries to the various feudal lords who had big red flowers hanging on their chests in front of the counters to find out the origin of these immortal herbs. The feudal lords who had long since unified their statements all pushed the origin of the immortal herbs to Wei Chuanqiu, saying that Wei Chuanqiu was the one who provided them. As the various sects' disciples passed on the news, They immediately sent people with money to purchase the immortal herbs that their sects needed. The trading scene on the lower 5 floors gradually became lively. The patrolling Yuchencho was overjoyed. For this opening he had put in a lot of effort. All the immortal herbs he sold were below 200 million divine-grade spirit stones. He didn't take out anything that was worth more than 200 million divine-grade spirit stones. Most of the immortal herbs he sold were worth less than 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. Even so, Huang Xiaolong was still worried. He studied the immortal herbs he sold according to the illustrated handbook for a long time. As long as the handbook indicated that the immortal herbs were the main ingredient of an immortal pill, Huang Xiaolong would always sell 1 or 2 ingredients. For example, if an immortal pill required 3 main ingredients, then one of the main ingredients would definitely not be sold. If it required 4 or 5 main ingredients, then 2 of them would never be sold. Yuchencho naturally had a deeper consideration for doing this. He couldn't disregard everything for the sake of money. Although the World Commerce Company's main purpose was to earn money, there were other things more important than that. Therefore he could earn money and he could sell large amounts of immortal herbs, but he would never allow the various sects to gather all the immortal herbs they needed. Otherwise, relying on those big sects' powerful financial strength to obtain the immortal pills they urgently needed, it would be akin to helping a tiger do evil. Of course, Yuchencho didn't rule out that those big sects had the immortal herbs they needed to refine immortal pills, but it was certain that they could only make up a small portion at most. It was impossible for them to make up for all the immortal herbs he sold, unless the various sects also had a utopia in their hands. Therefore, Yuchencho wasn't worried that the various sects could stir up too much trouble. He still had to continue earning the money he had to earn. After walking up and down a few times, seeing that the World Commerce Company's business was on the right track, Yuchencho smiled and prepared to return to the 6th floor because there were still guests there. Master Ye, Huolianqing and Du Kairan had all left, but Shui Mingqing and a few friends were still here as guests. As the host, he had to accompany them. Just as he was about to step onto the stairs to the 2nd floor, he suddenly heard a woman shout from behind him, "Sect leader Yu." Yuchencho was startled. He felt that the voice was very unfamiliar, as though he had never heard it before. He turned around and saw a man and a woman who looked relatively young walking over. Their looks weren't bad and they looked like a perfect match. Yuchencho turned around and asked suspiciously, "You two are?" The woman smiled and cupped her hands. "I'm Long Xiaojiu and Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Long Yugong is my grandfather." The man also cupped his hands and said, "I'm ancestor Guang Yin, and Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Guang Juanru is my grandfather." Excuse me. So it's the Hidden Dragon Villa's elder's grandson and granddaughter. Yuchencho cupped his hands politely as though he had heard of their great names for a long time, but he was muttering in his heart. He had heard of Hidden Dragon Villa, but he had never heard of these 2 old fellows. He didn't know if these 2 little fellows were real or not. Liars often appeared in this kind of lively occasion. Thus, he was somewhat on guard in his heart, but he still wore a smile on his face as he asked, "May I know why the 2 Hidden Dragon Villa's great disciples have come to find me?" Long Xiaojiu smiled and took out a gift box, saying, "The 2 of us have come under orders to represent Hidden Dragon Villa to congratulate the World Commerce Association on its auspicious opening and prosperous business." Guang Yinzu glanced at her. Orders were fake. It was true that she had pestered Long Yugong for half a day to agree, but he was sent to supervise her, afraid that she would see people she shouldn't see and cause trouble that she shouldn't. With a gift to receive, Yuchencho was naturally happy, but he also felt that it was a little strange. He had never interacted with Hidden Dragon Villa before, so why would they come to give him a gift? Could it be that they had sharp eyes and saw that the World Commerce Association had a bright future so they took the initiative to make friends? Then I'll thank your villa for their good intentions. Yuchencho accepted the gift, thinking that it wasn't a bad thing to have more powerful friends, so he raised his hand and said, "It's too noisy here. 2 esteemed guests, please follow me to a small table on the 6th floor." Long Xiaojiu and Guang Yinzu didn't act pretentious and followed him directly to the 6th floor. There was a person guarding the stairway to the 6th floor, obviously not allowing unauthorized people to trespass. When the guard saw that it was Yuchencho who had brought people over, he naturally let them go up. Once the 3 of them went up to the 6th floor, they were immediately isolated from the noise downstairs. With one look, it was obvious that someone had set up a soundproof barrier. Yuchencho brought the 2 of them through a corridor and pushed open a large door. Their eyes suddenly brightened up, and it turned out to be a large room. This was actually the living room on the 6th floor. The walls and floor were all inlaid with white jade slabs, and in addition to a few large transparent crystal floor-to-ceiling windows, the lighting was very good, making the entire living room seem spacious and bright. Chapter 888. A few rattan chairs were placed elegantly in the living room. Du Feng and the rest were either sitting or lying down as they chatted. Beside the transparent crystal window, there were 2 pots of devil's ivy. Wan Ling was standing there, curiously pulling the 2 ropes on the shutter to study it. One side of the shutter was constantly rolled up and down by her. Mu Tianjiao leaned back on a rattan chair and touched the armrest with both hands. She chuckled and said, "The simple furnishings in this living room reveal a unique elegance of craftsmanship. It's really rare. I wonder which refined scholar decorated it?" Unique and unique elegance? Hui Yunlong propped up his upper body from the slightly elastic rattan chair and looked around. He chuckled and said, "A few worthless rattan chairs in an empty living room is considered elegant? Forgive my poor eyesight, but I really can't tell. But this is the first time I find this rattan chair to be quite comfortable. It's not that hard and it's also breathable." Du Feng rolled his eyes and shook his head. "Didn't you notice that I feel much more relaxed after entering this place?" Hui Yunlong looked at himself and realized that he was lying down. He immediately sat up and smiled awkwardly. "It seems so. This is called artistic conception. It can make guests feel at home. You won't understand even if I explain it." Du Feng waved his hand in disdain. Mu Tianjiao couldn't help but smile. Hui Yunlong glared at her and wanted to argue, but he noticed that Yu Qianqiu had brought 2 people over. Yu Qianqiu walked to the center and pointed at the 2 people he brought. He said, "Let me introduce them. They are friends from Hidden Dragon Manor. Do you know them? Long Xiaojiu, Guang Yanzu." The 2 people cupped their hands and introduced themselves. Wan Ling, who was standing by the window, walked over and smiled. "I didn't expect Miss Long to be here." Guang Yanzu's expression changed when he saw Wan Ling. He looked at Long Xiaojiu worriedly. However, Long Xiaojiu's expression only changed slightly. Then she smiled and said, "Miss Wan, we meet again." Shui Mingqing and Mu Tianjiao smiled and nodded to greet the 2 newcomers. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong, on the other hand, looked at each other. Both of them had heard of the story of Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu. These 2 were enemies. How did they meet here? It's good that you know each other. Everyone sit down." Yu Qianqiu smiled and invited everyone to take a seat. After he sat down, he looked around and asked Mu Tianjiao curiously, "Where are the 2 people protecting you?" He was asking about the 2 golden-robed men who were protecting her. "I don't need anyone's protection here. I've invited them to stay at the Chamber of Commerce Alliance for the time being." Mu Tian smiled. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, "Miss Mu is no longer the same as before. She is protected by the people of the Immortal Palace wherever she goes. I'm so envious." Hui Yunlong and Du Feng looked a little embarrassed when he said that, so he couldn't go on. Mu Tianjiao was well aware of this. She pointed at the furnishings in the living room and changed the topic. "I wonder who decorated this living room. It's quite elegant. If it's convenient, introduce it to me so I can learn from it." "Elegant?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "I'm just afraid of trouble. To save money, I just found a few chairs and threw them here. They're not elegant at all." I knew it." Hui Yunlong laughed and slapped his leg. Du Feng immediately tilted his head and sneered. He was being modest, but you took it seriously. "Why don't you think about why this barren mountain became famous in the hands of sect leader Yu?" Hui Yunlong stared at him and said, "Are you saying that I have no taste?" All right. Yu Qianqiu quickly stood up and stopped the 2 from arguing. He smiled and said to everyone, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I have a new friend here, so I don't have much to entertain you. Why don't I treat you to a bath?" "A bath?" Hui Yunlong was stunned. He thought he had heard wrong. The others also looked at each other in confusion. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "That's right. I have authentic mountain spring water downstairs. It's perfect for bathing. It's also a specialty of my World Chamber of Commerce. I wonder if you're interested?" Is this appropriate?" Du Feng looked at Mu Tianjiao and the other 2 women. His words made the 3 women feel awkward. Yu Qianqiu immediately explained, "Actually, it doesn't matter. We have women in the World Chamber of Commerce too. The bathing area downstairs is separated into men and women. They won't interfere with each other. In that case, I'd like to experience the specialty of the World Chamber of Commerce." Wan Ling stood up with a smile and tilted her head to look at Long Xiaojiu. I wonder if Miss Long is interested? Long Xiaojiu's expression stiffened. Most women in this world were conservative. She wasn't used to talking about bathing with outsiders. However, Wan Ling's light and joking words were no different from provocation in her ears. She immediately gritted her teeth and stood up with a sweet smile. Then I'll accompany Miss Wan to experience the specialty of the World Chamber of Commerce. Seeing that everyone had agreed, everyone stood up and went downstairs. However, they were all stunned when they saw Mu Tianjiao sitting there alone. When Mu Tianjiao saw this, she waved at everyone and forced a smile. You guys go ahead. I'll be fine here. Yu Qianshou was still a little confused. However, the others understood that Mu Tianjiao was about to get married. A woman's reputation was very important at this time. If a group of men and women went to bathe and spread rumors, it wouldn't be good. Moreover, Mu Tianjiao was going to marry the Immortal Palace's external affairs commander, Wu Xiong. Du Feng secretly transmitted his voice to Yu Qianshou. Only then did Yu Qianshou react. He immediately led a group of people downstairs. The large living room was empty. Mu Tianjiao slowly leaned against the rattan chair and sat there alone. There was a rather big basement under the World Chamber of Commerce. In order not to destroy the water vein of the mountain spring, Yu Qianshou had personally built it. The entire basement was paved with white jade and illuminated by fluorescent stones. It was divided into two spaces, one big and one small. The big one was for men and the small one was for women. When they reached the bottom, a passageway appeared in front of them. At the end of the left was a stone sculpture of a strong, bare-chested man. There was a small stone door on the side. At the end of the right was a stone sculpture of a buxom woman. There was also a small stone door on the side. The symbolic stone sculpture was very obvious. It undoubtedly told the visitors that the men should go to the left and the women to the right. The two women looked calm, but they were actually a little nervous. The men and women separated here. Yu Qianshou led the group into the place where the men were bathing. When Hui Yunlong saw the environment inside, he immediately chuckled. This seems a little interesting. This was a circular space with a jade stone pool in the middle. The water in the pool was clear. The most attractive thing was that around the pool, there were 10 graceful and beautiful girls kneeling, standing, or lying on their sides. They were all stone sculptures with different movements. The only thing they had in common was that each of the 10 beautiful girls was holding a bottle and pouring water into the pool. This was where the clear spring water in the pool came from. At the same time, there were hidden grooves at the edge of the pool. When the water in the pool reached a certain height, it would flow out through the hidden grooves, maintaining the vitality of the mountain spring. Yu Qianshou chuckled and greeted the group. He then took the lead to demonstrate. He took off his pants and walked into the step-like pool. The center seemed to be a little deep. It reached Yu Qianshou's chin. After he wet himself, he swayed to a half-kneeling beauty stone sculpture. There was a place for him to lie down and enjoy the bath at the same time. Seeing the comfortable expression on his face, Hui Yunlong couldn't help but take off his clothes, leaving only his underwear. He couldn't wait to dive into the pool. He found that the pool water was cold but very comfortable. Then he found a beautiful stone sculpture that he liked and enjoyed it. Du Feng and Guang Juanru looked at each other. They also took off their clothes and ran into the pool. The four men chatted and soaked in the pool. It was very comfortable. The layout of the women's bathroom that Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu were in was similar to the men's bathroom, but the space was much smaller. Beside the pool, there were 4 strong men's stone sculptures holding bottles and pouring water. But at least they had a pair of underwear. What made the two women speechless was that they didn't know which wicked person made these stone sculptures. The 4 men's heads were carved with cloth strips that covered their eyes. They were quite considerate of the women. But even so, the 2 women felt a little uncomfortable and blushed slightly. Although they were stone sculptures, if they really took off their clothes and soaked in the pool, they would still feel like they were being watched by men. Miss Long, why is your face red? Are you shy? Wan Ling suddenly looked at Long Xiaojiu and smiled. Long Xiaojiu looked back and sneered, why don't you look at your face in the mirror? Wan Ling was stunned. Then she felt that her face was also a little hot. She was speechless. Long Xiaojiu was also stunned. She realized that this was the first time she made this woman speechless. She felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure in her heart. At the same time, she felt a little strange. This woman was famous for being a slut. Who knew how many men she had hooked up with? How could she be shy? The environment here is really special. It's really unique. As Wan Ling spoke, she began to undress herself. After a while, she was only left with a pair of underwear and a doo-doo. Her slender thighs were straight, her exposed skin was smooth and white, and her graceful figure was curvy. Even a woman would be tempted to look at her. Wan Ling deliberately walked to Long Xiaojiu and stood beside her. She tilted her head to look at Long Xiaojiu, who was slightly shorter than her. It was obvious that she wanted to show off her figure. Then she swayed her waist and walked into the pool. After soaking in the water, she splashed water with her palm and wiped her fragrant shoulders. She said to herself, "There was once someone who kept saying that my figure was the best in the world. Unfortunately, that person was killed by a jealous woman." When she said that, Long Xiaojiu was so angry that she almost bit her lips. The past flashed before her eyes. In the end, she suppressed her anger and slowly undressed her clothes. She also wore underwear and doo-doo and went into the water. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not. When she walked to Wan Ling, she reached behind her and gently pulled down the doo-doo. Her two breasts popped out. The smile on Wan Ling's face froze. Her mouth was slightly open as she subconsciously looked at her chest. Chapter 889. Some men are easily bewitched by some women. This kind of man is blind and can't even tell good from bad. He deserves to die. Long Xiaojiu held the clear spring water with both hands and poured it on her proud breasts. She said disapprovingly, "I've met such a man before." He came back to his senses and scolded himself for being blind. He said that some women can't attract a man's attention even if they strip naked. So, I don't know if what he said is true or false. But what's the use of keeping such a man who goes with the wind? Wan Ling was dumbfounded by Long Xiaojiu's words. Although Long Xiaojiu's words were nonsensical, they hit Wan Ling's weak spot, reminding her of the scholar she met many years ago. At that time she did strip naked. Who knew that the scholar would just take liberties with her and then leave without any reluctance? It seemed that her body was really not attractive to men. Miss Wan, what's wrong?" Long Xiaojiu said with concern, but a carefree smile appeared on her face. She had never won a verbal argument with her before. She didn't expect that she would be defeated by her today. Wan Ling came back to her senses. She couldn't help but stare at the other party's chest. She forced a smile and said, "Nothing, I suddenly thought of something." Long Xiaojiu said, "Oh," and suddenly asked curiously, "Why are you bathing in a doo-doo? Are you shy to see us naked?" "This water monster is cold." Wan Ling smiled absent-mindedly. "Miss Wan, you're wrong. It's uncomfortable to wear clothes in the water." Long Xiaojiu turned behind Wan Ling and said, "Come, I'll help you take it off." "It's okay. It's fine like this." Wan Ling hugged her chest and turned to avoid. However, the more she avoided, the more Long Xiaojiu wanted to see her look after being exposed. It seemed that she couldn't wait to take off her doo-doo. Ignoring the other party's repeated rejection, she stuck close to her and said kindly, "It's okay. It's nothing. I'll help you." As a result, Wan Ling was forced to the edge of the pool and had nowhere to retreat. Long Xiaojiu's hand touched her again. She immediately shouted in embarrassment and anger, "Get lost! Get lost!" She had never been so unconfident before, but because of Long Xiaojiu's nonsensical words, she immediately became powerless to fight back. In front of Long Xiaojiu, she was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Wan Ling came out of the water in a fluster and embarrassment. She quickly dried herself, took out her clothes and put them on hastily. As she walked, she tidied up her clothes and left in a hurry. Long Xiaojiu was stunned in the pool. Then a smile appeared on her face. The more she smiled, the more complacent she became. She laughed unrestrainedly until she was almost out of breath. Hugging her jiggling breasts, she laughed so hard that she bent forward and backward. On the other side, the 5 men who were chatting and taking a bath were suddenly startled by Wan Ling's scream. They looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. No matter how he heard it, it sounded like the cry of a pervert. Could it be that some shameless person came here to peep? "Everyone. I'm sorry, I'll make a move first." Guang Yinzu cupped his hands at them and quickly put on his clothes. Just as he reached the underground passage, he saw Wan Ling running out with tears in her eyes. He couldn't help but be stunned. The demoness Wan Ling was actually crying? Guang Yinzu rushed to the end of the passage in a hurry and stopped in front of the door. After all, this was a place for women to bathe. It wasn't good to barge in. At this moment, Long Xiaojiu's complacent and carefree laughter came from inside. Guang Yinzu hadn't heard her laugh like this for a long time. Things seemed a little strange. He stood outside and shouted anxiously, "Little Jiu, what's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm fine." "Why did you come here?" "This is a place for women to bathe." What are you doing here? Don't come in. Long Xiaojiu's voice came from inside. Guang Yinzu was stunned. He stood outside and said awkwardly, "Little Jiao, don't misunderstand. I just saw Wan Ling crying and ran out. I thought something happened here, so..." "She cried?" Long Xiaojiu's tone was very surprised. Then she giggled until she was out of breath. "Alright, don't stand outside anymore. Otherwise I'll feel uncomfortable all over. Let me soak in some more." The World Chamber of Commerce's mountain spring is indeed very comfortable. Then call me if you need anything. I won't go too far. After Guang Yinzu shouted, he listened for a while. Seeing that the person inside ignored him, he could only sigh and turn to leave. When he reached the end of the passage, he looked at the male bathroom in front of him. He felt that it wasn't appropriate to go back now. He simply stood against the wall and waited quietly. At this moment, Long Xiaojiu was happily soaking in the water. After leisurely and contented in the pool for a while, she suddenly took off her underwear and wandered around in the water naked. She constantly scrutinized her body and found that the places that should be protruding were protruding, the places that should be perky were protruding, and the places that should be thin were thin. This was the first time she was so satisfied with her body. She caressed her curves with an infatuated expression. In the male bathroom, Yu Qianqiu jumped out of the pool while cursing. He took out his clothes and prepared to wear them. Shui Mingqing also jumped out of the pool. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong looked at each other. Du Feng asked curiously, "Why are the two of you in such a hurry?" Yu Qianqiu lifted his clothes and glanced at the two indifferent people. He said in a bad mood, "Didn't the two of you hear the scream just now?" Du Feng and Hui Yunlong chuckled. Du Feng said with a smile, "Brother Yu, if that's what you're doing, then I advise you not to go. Let them solve it themselves. Otherwise you won't know who to help later." "What do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. Shui Mingqing was also confused. There were some things that he, who was once a low-level disciple, had never heard of. Guang Yinzu was here just now, so it wasn't easy to say some things. Come down, come down. The two of you come down. You'll understand after listening to me." Hui Yunlong waved his hands as he lay comfortably in the pool. The two of them walked back into the water in bewilderment. Hui Yunlong then told them about the grudge between Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu with a grin. After he was done, he smiled and said, "That's why these two women will quarrel whenever they meet. This is very normal and outsiders can't interfere." Yu Qianqiu and Shui Mingqing looked at each other speechlessly. They didn't expect Wan Ling, who looked like a decent person, to actually like to steal other people's men. Based on her qualifications, there should be many men who like her. Why would she do such a perverted thing? Du Feng smiled and continued, "Brother Yu, there are rumors that you and Wan Ling have an affair. They say that you're living off a woman. They say that the money for you to establish the World Chamber of Commerce was provided by Wan Ling. However, I don't think so. What I don't understand is, why did Wan Ling hold your hand in public that day? What's the relationship between you two?" Yu Qianqiu was completely speechless. He really didn't know what to say. Speaking of which, the money to establish the World Chamber of Commerce was really provided by Wan Ling. He paused and scolded loudly, "Who the F***CK is spreading rumors? I'm a righteous gentleman. I just know Wan Ling. It's not as dirty as you think." Seeing him get anxious, the others laughed and let it go. Actually, no one took it seriously. After a while, Yu Qianqiu got to the main topic and said to Shui Mingqing, "Brother Shui, I have something to trouble you to pass on when you see your master." "What is it?" Shui Mingqing asked. Yu Qianqiu leaned on the side of the pool with his hands on both sides and said slowly, "My World Chamber of Commerce's cultivation is limited. Even if we want to do big business, our strength is limited. Therefore, we're preparing to do some small business. Help me ask your master. I want to purchase a large amount of immortal pills from Skyward Palace and sell them at the World Chamber of Commerce to earn a bit of the price difference. Help me tell your master about this. If there's a possibility of cooperation, I'll personally go and talk to him." "No problem. I'll talk to master when I get back." Shui Mingqing nodded. Hui Yunlong, who was at the side, immediately got angry and shouted, "Brother Yu, why don't you talk to my mythical fire palace? You can totally buy immortal weapons from my mythical fire palace and sell them at the World Chamber of Commerce to earn the price difference. Don't worry. It's only a matter of time. Currently, my World Chamber of Commerce's financial resources are limited. We'll do it one by one." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and suddenly frowned. He looked at Du Feng and Hui Yunlong and asked curiously, "Haven't you two been chasing Mu Tianjiao for a long time? With your status in the immortal world, you should have caught up long ago. Why did the great commander of the immortal palace Wuxiong interfere? As soon as he said this, the two's faces were filled with bitterness. Shui Mingqing was a little curious. He didn't expect these two fellows to have chased Mu Tianjiao. Du Feng shook his head slowly and said, "Brother, you don't mention it anymore. Now that she's taken, there's no point in talking about it anymore. Otherwise it'll cause unnecessary trouble." Hu Yunlong, who was at the side, suddenly dived into the water. He held his head in the water for a while before popping his head out. He shook his head so hard that water splashed everywhere. He laughed loudly and said, "If you want to blame something, blame it on our two families not being strong enough. It's normal that she doesn't like us. The entire immortal world respects the immortal palace. To be able to find someone from the immortal palace as a backer, others can't even beg for it. What else can we say? After all, we're friends. We can only wish her well." Yu Qianqiu could hear a bit of helplessness and strong jealousy in their words. The meaning was very obvious. It was nothing more than saying that Mu Tianjiao had taken a fancy to the power of the immortal palace and had rejected them. But Yu Qianqiu frowned when he thought about it. He felt that Mu Tianjiao shouldn't be that kind of person. Mu Tianjiao was a proud and strong-willed woman. She didn't seem like the kind of woman who would be shameless for glory and wealth. This was what made her attractive. Otherwise, Du Feng and Hu Yunlong wouldn't have taken a fancy to her, and she wouldn't have come all the way to the World Chamber of Commerce to bow down and congratulate them. Chapter 890. With her current status as Wuxiong's woman, she didn't need to care about a small World Commerce Chamber. Now that she was here, Yu Qianqiu had a better impression of himself. He sneered at himself for being afraid of retaliation for rejecting the other party's love. Yu Qianqiu felt that there must be some unknown inside story and wondered if he should ask Mu Tianjiao if there was a chance. In reality, they were overcomplicating the problem. Mu Tianjiao just couldn't handle the pressure from Immortal Palace. Du Feng and Hu Yunlong were a little depressed because they brought up the topic of Mu Tianjiao. Since Mu Tianjiao had already become Wuxiong's woman, Yu Qianqiu couldn't say anything else. The atmosphere immediately became a little depressing. After they casually soaked in the hot spring, they got up. After putting on their clothes, they walked out and saw Long Xiaojiu coming out as well. When they met, the men noticed that Long Xiaojiu was full of energy and radiant after her bath. They were all surprised by the miraculous effects of the spring bath. They couldn't help but look at each other and realized that the men hadn't changed much. "Is Wan Ling still soaking in there?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the other end of the tunnel and asked. Long Xiaojiu chuckled and said, "She encountered something unhappy, so she left first." The men looked at each other and guessed that the two women might be fighting again. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything and led them out of the underground. After coming out, Shui Mingqing remembered what Yu Qianqiu had told him and bade farewell to everyone. Everyone thought that Wan Ling had left, but when they returned to the 6th floor, they found Wan Ling and Mu Tianjiao sitting opposite each other and chatting happily. When the two women saw them return, they stood up to greet them. Long Xiaojiu couldn't help but frown when she saw that Wan Ling seemed to be fine. The sky was already close to dusk, and the guests were about to leave when Yu Qianqiu smiled and urged them to stay. "My 6th floor has always been used to entertain guests, and I haven't used it even once. Everyone please do me the honor. In the evening, I would like to invite all of you to the rooftop to watch the stars and admire the moon, and to taste my World Chamber of Commerce's barbecue and wine." Looking at the sky outside, Wan Ling hesitated before she said, "It's fine with us, but Sister Tianjiao's identity is a little sensitive. I'm afraid it won't be convenient for her to spend the night with a bunch of men." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "What does that have to do with anything? Aren't you and Miss Long a woman?" Glancing at Long Xiaojiu, Wan Ling smiled. "Miss Long and I don't have a good reputation in this field. I'm afraid that we might implicate Sister Tianjiao." She was really self-aware, but Long Xiaojiu was angered by her. It was all thanks to her that she was able to achieve her current reputation. They all knew the meaning of her words. Mu Tianjiao's current identity was indeed very sensitive. A little bit of gossip could cause trouble. If Su Yi didn't return it and mixed with two women who were fighting over a man, who knew what kind of rumors would spread? Gossip was a fearful thing. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. In his mind, this was making a mountain out of a molehill, but if he was serious here, there were indeed many things to pay attention to. Seeing that he was having a headache, Du Feng smiled and said, "Brother Yu, you don't have to worry too much. With so many people in the World Chamber of Commerce, it's not like you can't find a woman. Just hire one to accompany the guests. With a woman by your side, you can more or less avoid suspicion." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. There were also several women in the World Chamber of Commerce. After thinking about it, he still felt that it was most suitable for Lu Yanqing to accompany a guest like Mu Tianjiao. There was no need to do anything, just be a vase. In any case, it was just a decoration. This was because he found that other than treating people, Lu Yanqing basically couldn't do anything. Furthermore, her ability to handle things was extremely poor. He really didn't know how she had survived for so many years. Just like now, when she was given some work to do, she always had to get Wen Lanfeng's help in order to do it well. Just a small matter would require two people. At this moment, someone came down to report that two of Mu Tianjiao's guards had come to pick her up. Yu Qianqiu looked at Mu Tianjiao's intentions, then instructed his subordinate, invite them up and also call Lu Yanqing over. That person agreed and left. Not long later, the two golden-robed men arrived. Mu Tianjiao cupped her hands and bowed, I won't be leaving today. I'll stay at the World Chamber of Commerce for the night and leave tomorrow. I'll have to trouble the two of you to stay here for the night. The two golden-robed men cupped their hands in agreement. They had no objections. They were originally sent by Wu Xiong to protect Mu Tianjiao or listen to her orders, so they had no right to control Mu Tianjiao's freedom. Mu Tianjiao then said to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, I'll have to trouble sect leader Yu to arrange 2 rooms for them. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, since they were sent by the commander to protect you, then arrange for them to be on the left and right side of your room. What do you think? Mu Tianjiao knew that he was using this to get Wu Xiong's people to avoid arousing suspicion, so she agreed. The two maintained a certain level of respect in their words and actions. In reality, Yu Qianqiu hated doing this kind of thing the most, because he knew that the two of them couldn't be pure friends. He was a man, and the other was Wu Xiong's woman. Even if the other party condescended to treat him, he still had to keep his distance. Even if the other party wasn't Wu Xiong's woman, imagine a man always maintaining a close friendship with someone else's wife? Pure friendship? In his previous life, there might be quite a few pure and upright gentlemen who would agree with this reason. Of course, the important premise was that the other party's wife had to be ugly, making it hard for others to lay their hands on her. Otherwise, if pure and upright gentlemen saw the two of them being too close, there would inevitably be times when their stomachs would bubble. However, in this era where both men and women had long hair, if you were too close to someone else's wife, not to mention everything else, just their saliva could drown you. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu himself didn't believe that handsome men and beautiful women would always stick together and have a pure friendship. Perhaps there might be, but unfortunately he had never encountered such a thing. Even if nothing happened, the hearts of both men and women would still itch. Of course, this was mainly because he wasn't broad-minded enough, always measuring the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. There was no helping it. He felt like he was one of the many wolves wearing sheep's clothing, but deep down he was still a wolf. He also always imagined that he was the only wolf in the world and that everyone else was a pure lamb. Therefore he consciously maintained an appropriate distance from Mu Tianjiao. Naturally, he took a fancy to Mu Tianjiao's identity and hoped that she could help him at a critical moment. And Mu Tianjiao condescended to come here, hoping to give the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce an escape route in the uncertain future. In reality, Du Feng and the others also tried their best to keep their distance from Mu Tianjiao. Of course, women like Wan Ling didn't have such scruples. Instead, the closer the relationship, the better. Not long after, Lu Yanqing slowly arrived. Lu Yanqing's arrival immediately caused the eyes of the guests in the living room to light up. Although Du Feng and the others had entered the Divine Ruin Realm before, because Lu Yanqing didn't like to fight and kill, she always hid behind the lords of the various countries when they appeared. In addition, she knew that her appearance was outstanding, so when there were too many people, she tried her best not to show her face so no one, including Mu Tianjiao, had seen her. This is Lu Yanqing. After Yu Qianqiu introduced Lu Yanqing to everyone, he then introduced Mu Tianjiao to Lu Yanqing. This is the fiancée of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong. It's inconvenient for her to stay with us men, so you should stay close to her before she leaves. Lu Yanqing faintly smiled at everyone. This smile immediately made Du Feng and Hui Yunlong unable to move their eyes away. Wan Ling and the other women suddenly felt ashamed of their inferiority. They didn't expect the World Chamber of Commerce to have such a beautiful woman. Help me greet the guests. Yu Qianqiu instructed Lu Yanqing, then cupped his hands towards the crowd and said, everyone please take a seat, I have something to do, I'll be right back. The few of them were a little absent-minded when they saw Lu Yanqing, and didn't notice that Yu Qianqiu had left. After Yu Qianqiu left, he went straight to the top floor. He didn't see Wei Chuanxiu at first, but later on he felt that it was a little strange. This guy always liked to follow behind him, but now that half a day had passed he still hadn't seen him. He had noticed it when he came up from below, but he didn't see Wei Chuanxiu. Now he suspected that Wei Chuanxiu was with Yun Peng, as he expected. When he reached the top floor, Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng were standing side by side at the edge of the railing. Yu Qianqiu was suspicious in his heart. Why was this old fellow so patient today to accompany Yun Peng on guard? As soon as he appeared, Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng also turned to look. Without waiting for the smiling Yu Qianqiu to speak, Wei Chuanxiu was already waving at him. Yu Qianqiu, I was just looking for you. Yu Qianqiu was startled and found that both of their faces were a little serious. After approaching the two of them, he asked suspiciously, "Looking for me? What's the matter?" Wei Chuanxiu was silent for a moment, then said solemnly, "After coming back, I have been discussing this matter with Yun Peng. Because this matter is of great importance, Yun Peng also thought that he should find you to clarify this matter. Although I don't know if you will answer honestly, I still have to ask you." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed and he vaguely guessed what was going on. Before he didn't pay attention, but after doing that he regretted it a little. But after thinking about it, there was nothing to regret. Hiding everything was not a solution. After all, he couldn't just take a beating and not fight back. "What's the matter? You make it sound like it's something serious," Yu Qianqiu said with a puzzled expression. "Do you still remember the myriad swords burst that you used in the battle earlier?" Wei Chuanqiu said word by word. "Right now there are people who suspect that you are related to the myriad swords demon lord. You should also know that the immortal world and the netherworld cannot tolerate the remnants of the myriad swords demon lord." "Suspect that I am related to the myriad swords demon lord?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at his own nose as if he heard the world's funniest joke and said, "I actually hope that I can be related to the myriad swords demon lord, but it is a pity that it is impossible. The myriad swords demon lord has been dead for so many years. Who is so bored to actually connect me with the myriad swords demon lord?" The Chamber of Commerce Alliance's Great Bright Wheel Controller. Wei Chuanqiu's green brows knitted together, and her expression was abnormally serious. "In reality, you need to go and explain to him. We are only asking you to have an idea in our hearts so that we can prepare early. We have no ill intentions towards you." Saying that, she waved her hand and pointed around. "Do you believe that the Chamber of Commerce Alliance has already arranged people around here? If it wasn't for the two of us, the Great Bright Wheel Controller would have already taken action. In short, if you don't give him a satisfactory answer, it is impossible for you to leave the hallucination immortal city." Chapter 891. The sky gradually darkened. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around on the rooftop, scanning his surroundings. Although he didn't see anyone from the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, since Wei Chuanqiu had said this, it must be true that someone was watching him. "I really have nothing to do with the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch." Yu Qianqiu shook his head helplessly. A person who's been dead for God knows how many years can still cause such a commotion. This Thousand Swords Demon Monarch didn't die in vain. What does the Great Bright Wheel Wielder want to know? "I want to know why you can control 10,000 swords." A voice came from behind him. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned his head and saw a thin golden-robed Deming Luan appear behind him without him noticing. Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng's expressions were normal. Clearly they already knew that the Great Bright Wheel was here. "Greetings to the Great Bright Wheel Wielder." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and explained, "I'm just a vagrant cultivator with slightly better luck. I really have nothing to do with the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch." The Great Bright Wheel coldly interrupted, "No one cares about your background and luck. I don't want to hear this, and the Immortal Emperor won't listen to this nonsense. No matter how noble your background is, it means nothing to him. Don't beat around the bush. Just explain clearly why you can control 10,000 swords like the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch." Then what should he say? Yu Qianqiu was startled. There was such a person in this world. A person who didn't care about the cause and effect and only wanted the final answer. Was this person still human? He couldn't help but look at Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu seemed to see through his doubts and transmitted, "There's nothing strange. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai has ruled the immortal world for so long. There are very few things that can interest him. I just heard from the Great Bright Wheel that Immortal Emperor Jin Tai doesn't care about anything. Most of the things are handled by his subordinates. He only cares about the final result. If anyone dares to lie to him, he will kill them once he finds out. Seems like a poor fellow who has lost the joy of life." Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, "The sword technique I'm practicing is called Guiyuan Sword Technique. It has nothing to do with the legendary Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. Is that okay? Guiyuan Sword Technique? The three of them pondered for a moment. They seemed to have never heard of this technique before. The Great Bright Wheel then asked simply, "How can you prove that what you said is true?" Yu Qianqiu was prepared for this. He took out a jade archive and handed it over. "This is the Guiyuan Sword Technique that I'm practicing. If you don't believe me, you can verify it." De Mingluan took the jade archive and examined it. He confirmed that it was indeed a sword technique. He didn't care whether Yu Qianqiu agreed to it or not. He put it away and said, "It's hard to tell if it's real or fake. I'll keep it for now. If I can confirm that this sword technique can truly control 10,000 swords, I'll send someone to return it to you." Wei Chuanqiu frowned and said, "Great Bright Wheel, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. A cultivation technique is the foundation of a cultivator. It's the most important thing to keep a secret. In order to prove his innocence, he's already taken it out for you to see. You still don't believe him? You still want to take it away? To the Immortal Palace, as long as the Immortal Palace needs it, they have the right to pry into any secret in the Immortal Realm," the Great Bright Wheel said indifferently. "You." Wei Chuanqiu was instantly enraged. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly pulled him back and said, "This sword art is actually just a facade. The 10,000 swords might look quite frightening, but it's actually just for show. It doesn't have much power at all. If you want to take it, then take it. As long as you can prove my innocence, you don't have to return it. Anyway, I've made a few copies here." Actually, the sword technique he was practicing was modified. The one he gave to the Great Bright Wheel was the original version of the supporting Immortals Island. It didn't matter if he wanted it or not. Even if he took 10,000 steps back, it was necessary to sacrifice something in exchange for his innocence. After exchanging some pleasantries, Wei Chuanqiu suddenly said to Yu Qianqiu, "Go on with your business. We have some private things to talk about." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the three, cupped his fists and left with a stomach full of complaints. He didn't know what these three old fellows were plotting. They actually wanted him to leave. After watching him leave, Wei Chuanqiu said with a worried expression, "Great Bright Wheel, tell me honestly, will Immortal Emperor Jin Taishiang believe it?" "Whether or not Immortal Emperor Jin Taishiang believes it depends on the attitude of the two of you," the Great Bright Wheel said indifferently. Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng looked at each other in confusion. Wei Chuanqiu asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" "Nothing." The Great Bright Wheel slowly turned around and placed his hands on the white jade railing. He silently stared at the crescent moon that shone with silver radiance for a while before asking, "Yun Peng has always been cultivating in White Cloud Mountain, and you have disappeared for so many years. What I don't understand is why the two of you would appear in such a manner to serve Yu Qianqiu. What's his background to be worthy of you doing this? What's the relationship between the two of you? For the sake of Yu Qianqiu, is it really worth it for the two of you to involve yourselves in this matter? If he really is related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, you should know what the consequences are." Yun Peng's calm gaze flickered as he stared at the Great Bright Wheel. Wei Chuanqiu frowned and said, "Didn't Yu Qianqiu even take out his own cultivation technique? I don't think it's fake. With this kind of irrefutable evidence, how can we not prove that he's related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord?" "Irrefutable evidence? You mean this?" The Great Bright Wheel, who had both hands on the white jade railing, turned around and took out the jade archive that Yu Qianqiu had given him. In front of Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng, he crushed it into powder. Wei Chuanqiu exclaimed, "Great Bright Wheel, what do you mean by this?" "What do you think I mean?" The Great Bright Wheel snorted coldly, "So what if it's irrefutable evidence? Do you really think that the Immortal Emperor Jin Tai would go through so much trouble for the sake of a mere Yu Qianqiu? I can tell you without a doubt that he would rather kill the wrong person than let him off. 3 days. Within 3 days the news will definitely reach his ears, and within these 3 days he will be waiting for news from me. If he doesn't hear from me within 3 days, then 3 days later, the Immortal Palace enforcers will depart from the Immortal Palace. Needless to say, Yu Qianqiu's death is certain. The entire World Commerce Chamber of Commerce will also face a massacre, including those who are close to him. Not a single one of them will survive. And because of my incompetence, I will also be punished." The exceptionally enchanting moonlight instantly turned cold and gloomy. At least, that was what Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu felt at this moment. They were among those who were close to Yu Qianqiu, but they too would not be able to escape death. After a moment of silence on the cold rooftop, Wei Chuanqiu broke the silence, saying, "Then why did you want Yu Qianqiu to give a reasonable explanation? Isn't this unnecessary?" The great bright wheel suddenly turned and faced the moonlit mountains outside. He slowly said, "I just wanted to test him. At least let me die in peace." The two at the side looked at each other, not knowing why he would say such a thing. Yun Peng, who had been silent all this time, said coldly, "It's not that serious. Didn't you join the Immortal Palace to live well? Now that you are in charge of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, the word, death, is too far away from you." The rooftop sank into a brief silence. The great bright wheel slowly closed his eyes. "Yun Peng, back then the three of us settled our debts of gratitude and revenge in the immortal world. You should know how many people we offended. At that time our situation was already precarious. The Immortal Palace recruited us because of this. Do you think I don't want to be free? Do you think I don't want to be free? If one of you had been willing to accept the Immortal Palace's recruitment, I definitely wouldn't have accepted it. However, the two of you refused to join the Immortal Palace no matter what, so I was the unlucky one." "What do you mean?" Wei Chuanxiu asked in confusion. "What does whether we join the Immortal Palace have to do with whether you join the Immortal Palace or not?" The great bright wheel closed his eyes and didn't speak. It seemed like he didn't want to explain anymore. Yun Peng's body shook. He stared at the great bright wheel and said, "Looks like we have misunderstood you all these years. But why didn't you explain back then?" The great bright wheel opened his eyes and looked into the dark night. He smiled bitterly and said, "If I really explained it back then, I'm afraid the two of you would have fought to join. I wanted to explain it to you later, but you didn't even give me a chance. Later, because of the fierce internal strife in the Immortal Palace, I thought it would be better not to contact you too, lest I hurt you." Yun Peng wasn't good at expressing his emotions. He just nodded slightly to show that he understood. Wei Chuanxiu's head kept shaking left and right. He looked from one to the other and pulled his hair with both hands. He said anxiously, "What are you two talking about? Why don't I understand? Aren't you very good at cheating?" Yun Peng was sarcastic, but he still reminded him in the end, "Back then we had too many enemies and were chased everywhere. Later, he joined the Immortal Palace and we immediately became much more relaxed. We didn't have to run for our lives anymore." At this point, Wei Chuanxiu wasn't stupid. Combining what the two had just said, the misunderstandings from the past immediately disappeared. In short, the great bright wheel had joined the Immortal Palace because he had no choice. They had caused too much trouble and were chased every 2 or 3 days. In the end, they had provoked more and more experts. Seeing that everyone was about to die, the Immortal Palace had extended an olive branch to them. However, Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu would rather die than submit. They were unwilling to join the Immortal Palace and be restrained. As a good brother, the great bright wheel naturally knew the knot in the hearts of the two brothers. This was because the Immortal Palace was the place with the most tamed immortal beasts in the entire immortal world. They were also immortal beasts, so they didn't like the Immortal Palace. Although the great bright wheel didn't want to be restrained, he had no choice. In order to protect his life and his brothers, he could only compromise. Who knew that because of this, the brothers wouldn't get along? They had been misunderstood for so long. Today the injustice was cleared. "Yun Peng, do you think this guy joined the Immortal Palace to save his life because he couldn't escape as fast as the two of us?" Wei Chuanxiu laughed. Yun Peng, who was beside him, nodded. Under the starry sky, the three of them unknowingly stood side by side in front of the white jade railing. Just like many years ago, a bright moon shone in the sky and the shadows of green and jade wings followed. Chapter 892. With the years of estrangement gone, the three of them stood side by side in front of the white jade railing and immediately began to talk about everything. Wei Chuanxiu was puzzled and asked, "You just said that Jin Tai Xiang will have to see our attitudes if he doesn't believe you. What do you mean by that? If Yu Qianshou is not closely related to the two of you, what does his life or death have to do with me? What does the life or death of others have to do with me? Although the two of you are with him, with my current position in the Immortal Palace, it is not difficult to protect the two of you." De Ming Luan looked left and right and sighed, "If the two of you really have an extraordinary relationship with him, then I can only do my best to be a guarantor in front of Jin Tai Xiang and guarantee that Yu Qianshou has nothing to do with the Demon Lord of Thousand Swords." Yun Peng was not good with words and tilted his head to look at Wei Chuanxiu, but Wei Chuanxiu frowned and did not say anything. In fact, De Ming Luan had another hidden meaning that even if he were to be a guarantor in front of immortal Emperor Jin Tai might not give him face and might even implicate him. "There are some things that I can't tell you now. Let's talk about it when the time is right. In short, Yu Qianshou is very important now and cannot die. Wei Chuanqiu muttered slowly. It was not that he wanted to hide it from the two of them, but the Thousand Demon Heart Sutra had too many implications. Although the Demon Lord of Thousand Swords was powerful, he was certainly not a match for an expert like the Demon God. Once the 10,000 Demonic Heart Sutra written by Tai Shu Zheng, who was on the same level as the Devil God, was exposed, no one would be able to have an easy time. At that time, Jin Tai would probably kill everyone who was involved and would not show any mercy. He did not want Yun Peng and Deming Luan to worry about the matter until he had absolute confidence that it could be resolved. In that case, I will personally go to the Immortal Palace and meet the Immortal Emperor to be a guarantor for Yu Qianqiu. Deming Luan said lightly. Yun Peng suddenly turned and asked, "Will there be any danger?" Wei Chuanqiu also looked over and Deming Luan shook his head. There shouldn't be any problems. After all, he has served Jin Tai Xiang for so many years. However, if one day it is proven that this Yu Qianqiu is indeed related to the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch, then we will be out of luck. He purposely spoke casually, but in reality he had no confidence in meeting Jin Tai. The main reason was that the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch was truly a taboo to Jin Tai. If not for the fact that the 10,000 Swords Demon Lord was already dead, the Great Bright Will wouldn't even need to think about it. They wouldn't even need to look for Jin Tai. They could just escape together. Before he left, Deming Luan suddenly took out an item and handed it to Wei Chuanqiu, saying, "After being in charge of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance for so many years, it's not like I've come back empty-handed. I accidentally stumbled upon this." With that said, it seemed like he didn't want to see anything else and turned into a stream of light and flew away. Wei Chuanqiu's little eyes widened, and in that instant, her eyes were filled with tears. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the thing in her palm and muttered absent-mindedly, "Xiao Yu Yun Peng tilted his head to take a look, and his pupils immediately shrank. This was a small blue bat jade pendant that was not even half the size of a palm. Although it was carved with the same ferocious face as Wei Chuanqiu's original form, it was small and exquisite, and had many cute points. Others didn't know what this blue bat jade pendant meant, but Yun Peng and the Great Bright Wheel were very clear about it. Back then Wei Chuanqiu wasn't a loner. He had a wife and a daughter. Later on, because Wei Chuanqiu caused some trouble, his enemies came looking for him. Coincidentally, Wei Chuanqiu wasn't around, so his wife and daughter were not spared. It was also because of this that the furious Wei Chuanqiu, Yun Peng and the Great Bright Wheel annihilated the entire enemy's family. This also implicated more and more trouble, and the three of them were constantly being pursued until the Great Bright Wheel joined the Immortal Palace. And this blue bat jade pendant was personally carved by Yun Peng, and he gave it to Wei Chuanqiu's daughter as a gift. Although this little thing wasn't worth much, it was something that Xiao Yu had always worn. It had been lost for many years, and she didn't expect that the Great Bright Wheel would find it. To Wei Chuanqiu it had an extraordinary meaning. To Yun Peng it also had an extraordinary meaning. Wu Xiao Yu Wei Chuanqiu sat on the rooftop and hugged the jade pendant with both hands as he cried his heart out. Yun Peng shook his head, sighing lightly. Knowing that Wei Chuanqiu needed to vent, he allowed Wei Chuanqiu to cry without stopping him. It was fortunate that the three of them had set up a soundproofing barrier before their conversation, otherwise it would have alerted the entire World Commerce Hall. As the sky darkened, passing by the 6th floor, Yu Qianqiu saw that Mu Tianjiao's group was chatting happily with Lu Yanqing, so he did not disturb them. Instead, he went down to the trading center below. Although there were still quite a lot of people here, it was obvious that there were fewer people than during the day. After strolling from the 1st floor back to the 5th floor, Yu Qianqiu pushed open the side hall's door and walked in. Jing Yuankong, who was settling accounts inside, quickly stood up seeing Huang Xiaolong's arrival. Yu Qianqiu looked out the transparent crystal window, taking in the scene outside with a smile. "How's the situation?" "Up until now we've sold 30 billion divine-grade spirit stones worth of herbs." Jing Yuankong answered excitedly. He was used to seeing spirit stones in the human world's World Commerce Hall, but he had never seen so many spirit stones. "Only 30 billion? Yu Qianqiu's brows wrinkled slightly. The immortal herbs he put up for sale were valued at around 80 billion, which meant that they hadn't even reached half of the sales. "It's like this," Jing Yuankong immediately explained. "There are many immortal herbs that aren't sold in high quantities. On the contrary, the higher the value, the better they sell. Should we put up some good immortal herbs for sale?" Yu Qianqiu pondered for a moment, then slowly shook his head. "No need, we'll slowly sell the rest of the immortal herbs. We'll sell them for a month. It's better if we can sell them all, but it's fine if we can't. We also pay attention to the method of seeking wealth, there's no need to rush, otherwise going too far is as bad as falling short. He was well aware that putting up so many immortal herbs was already too conspicuous. If there was a steady stream of good stuff appearing on the shelves, it would be hard not to arouse suspicion. Only by stopping in moderation would they be able to handle the situation with ease. On top of that, the celestial ruin realm had just opened so they could cover it up. Jing Yuankong immediately understood Huang Xiaolong's meaning, remembering that they had just established a foothold in the immortal world. If they acted too conspicuously, it would only bring trouble to themselves. Jing Yuankong immediately nodded. Understood, I'll arrange for all the immortal herbs to be sold on the first floor tomorrow. You know this better than me, you can decide how to sell the immortal herbs. Yu Qianqiu said a few words, then returned to the sixth floor with his hands clasped behind his back. Inside the everlasting trade hall, for some unknown reason, the elders of the four sects who had supported Yu Qianqiu earlier in the day were gathered together again, each of them wearing a worried expression. After a moment of silence, Wang Yi said solemnly, although his methods are similar to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's, that doesn't prove that he's related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. Moreover, the Myriad Swords Demon Lord has been dead for a long time. Yafuzi shook his head slowly, nothing is absolute. Maybe he picked up the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's cultivation technique and became the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's disciple. Du Kairin, who was sitting at the side, snorted coldly. Whether Yu Qianqiu is related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord or not is secondary, the key is immortal Emperor Jin Tai. He's a person who can't tolerate sand in his eyes, he won't allow another Myriad Swords Demon Lord to appear in the immortal world. Anything that can threaten him will be eradicated by him. This is an undeniable fact. Today when we went to support Yu Qianqiu's event, we've undoubtedly dragged the four sects into the water, more or less implicated. The corner of Huo Lianqing's mouth twitched. Could it be that just because we supported Yu Qianqiu's event, the immortal emperor is going to implicate the four of us? Du Kairin said in a deep voice. It's precisely because we are the four great sects and not some ordinary small sect that we came to support a small world commerce association. This is the biggest reason for suspicion. The immortal emperor is a temperamental person, no one knows what he is thinking. If he really suspects us, then how could he give us a chance to explain? He simply doesn't put our four clans in his eyes. If he wants to eradicate us, it would only take a single word from him. Everyone's expressions changed and became unsightly. Wang Yi sighed softly. If it's a blessing it's not a curse, and if it's a curse we can't avoid it. It's not a solution for us to make wild guesses here, we can only take one step at a time. Right now, it's more important to call back those juniors and avoid arousing suspicion. Don't get too entangled with Yu Qianqiu. Secondly, everyone should quickly report this matter to their sects and make preparations early. Otherwise, when disaster strikes, we won't be caught unprepared. On the rooftop of the World Commerce Association, the aroma of barbecued meat and fine wine filled the air again. Yu Qianqiu once again displayed his barbecue skills. As he fiddled with the barbecue, Yu Qianqiu felt a little strange. He saw Wei Chuanqiu sitting by the white jade railing in the distance, his head buried in something, while Yun Peng silently stood by his side. Not long after, the food that Yu Qianqiu had meticulously prepared was placed on everyone's table. Just as everyone was about to eat heartily, someone came up from downstairs and reported to Yu Qianqiu with cupped fists, "Sect Master, Wan Gu Tong, Mythical Fire Palace and Spirit Cultivation Sect have all sent people over, saying that they have important matters to attend to and ask their disciples to return quickly." Wan Ling and the others looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. Why did the three great sects all send people to summon them? They guessed that something big must have happened and couldn't sit still anymore. They all stood up and left without eating anything. Thus, only Yu Qianqiu, Mu Tianjiao, Lu Yanqing and Long Xiaojiu were left. But not long after, someone came to report that the Hidden Dragon Manor had also sent people to urge Long Xiaojiu to return quickly. Seeing that Long Xiaojiu had also left, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a little strange. He frowned and said, "All the sects said something happened. Could it be that something big happened in the immortal world?" Mu Tianjiao and Lu Yanqing looked at each other. They were even more confused. Because the three of them had their own thoughts, the barbecue didn't taste good. In the end, Lu Yanqing still accompanied Mu Tianjiao to rest. Only then did Yu Qianqiu walk over to where Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu were. When he barged into the soundproofing barrier, he discovered Wei Chuanqiu sitting on the ground, sobbing. He immediately cried out in alarm, "Bat King Wei, what's wrong? Did Great Bright Will hit you?" Chapter 893. Wei Chuanxiu didn't react to his words and continued to sit there crying. Yun Peng on the other hand turned around and glared at him. Yu Qianqiu shrank his neck slightly. Senior Yun, what happened to him? Yun Peng kept his mouth shut and did not answer, but Wei Chuanxiu's sobs kept bouncing out the word, Xiao Yu. Yu Qianqiu immediately squatted down beside him and asked curiously, Bat King Wei, who is Xiao Yu? Is she your old lover? Yun Peng couldn't bear it anymore and shouted, Don't talk nonsense here, Xiao Yu is his daughter. His daughter? Yu Qianqiu stood up and said in surprise, His daughter is here? Where is she? Where is she? Is she beautiful? Don't tell me she's made from the same mold as the old bat. As he spoke he looked around. However, although there were constantly flowing lights in the dark night sky, how could he tell who was who? Bastard. Yun Peng couldn't bear it anymore and roared, His daughter has been dead for tens of thousands of years. Died for tens of thousands of years. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After a while, he sat beside Wei Chuanxiu and patted his back, comforting him, Bat King Wei, the dead can't come back to life, my condolences. It would have been better if he didn't comfort him, but once he did, there was a problem. Wei Chuanxiu immediately wailed loudly, Xiao Yu, it's father's fault. I've harmed you and your mother. What did I do to offend you? Yu Qianqiu only felt his eardrums tremble and his scalp go numb. He was speechless and quickly got up to stand beside Yun Peng. How did his daughter die? And what's going on with the great bright wheel manager of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance? Yu Qianqiu picked his ears and asked Yun Peng. In the end he realized that Yun Peng didn't care about him at all. Instead, he walked out of the soundproof enchantment and seemed to be concentrating on listening to something. Yu Qianqiu was slightly taken aback. He listened attentively and immediately discovered that Wei Chuanxiu's loud cries were accompanied by the faint sounds of a zither. He also stepped out of the soundproof enchantment, and Wei Chuanxiu's cries were immediately cut off. In the quiet night, there was a faint singing sound that sounded like the spirits of a beautiful woman. It was very pleasant to listen to. The sound came from downstairs. I have a flower that grows in my heart. No one understands true love. After Yu Qianqiu heard it clearly, his expression twitched. He knew that it was Lu Yanqing who was playing and singing. Tilting his head to look at Yun Peng, he discovered that Yun Peng's usually calm face had a look of surprise, as if he had heard the sound of nature. Yu Qianqiu looked at Wei Chuanxiu, who was still crying non-stop, and was completely speechless. He realized that he had nothing in common with these two experts tonight, so he immediately flung his sleeves and left. Inside the Wan Gu Tong branch, Wan Ling was stunned after hearing Wan Gi's analysis. Then she covered her mouth and giggled, gasping for breath as she said, You guys actually think that Yu Qianqiu is related to the 10,000 Swords Demon Lord? Wan Gui frowned, saying solemnly, Wan Ling, regardless of whether the 10,000 Swords Demon Lord is related to Yu Qianqiu or not, based on Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's cold-bloodedness, as long as there is such a possibility, he will be punished immediately. We have no choice but to take precautions. It's better to distance ourselves from him for now. Don't be stubborn, think about it carefully. I'm going to report this matter to the sect leader. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Wan Ling giggling behind him. Elder, please stay, there's no need to report this matter to grandfather. Don't worry, Immortal Emperor Jin Tai will definitely not pursue this matter, and grandfather will not take it to heart. Wan Gi turned around saying, This matter is not a small matter, if something happens no one can bear the responsibility, the sect leader has to make the decision himself. Finished, no matter how Wan Ling tried to persuade him, he directly left. Wan Ling could only shake her head helplessly. The reason why she was so calm in the face of chaos was because she knew that Yu Qianqiu was Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's trusted spy. If she knew that Yu Qianqiu was a fake, who knew if she would still be so calm? Not long after, Wan Gi returned with a puzzled expression. Wan Ling smiled at him, asking, What is the sect leader's opinion? Wan Gi shook his head in a muffled voice. When he contacted the sect leader to report this matter, Wan Bushing was only dazed for a moment before asking him what Wan Ling's opinion was. Wan Gi naturally conveyed Wan Ling's opinion to the sect leader, but Wan Bushing immediately expressed that Wan Ling could make the decision on this matter. Wan Ling, is there an inside story behind this that I don't know? Wan Gi asked suspiciously. Wan Ling shook her head with a smile and said, Elder Wan, there are some things that you shouldn't ask. It won't do you any good if you know. The former immediately choked and became speechless. Although Wan Gi and Wan Ling had the same ancestor and were much older than Wan Ling, in reality Wan Ling was actually several generations older than Wan Gi. This kind of phenomenon was very common in the various sects and clans, and the reason for it was naturally because the lifespan of immortal cultivators was too long, and the time difference in carrying on the family line was too great. So the various sects in the immortal dimension would normally stop addressing each other according to seniority after a gap of 4 generations, and they would usually address each other by position or name. Of course, positions were not taken according to seniority, but according to cultivation and ability. From this, it could be seen that it would indeed be troublesome if everyone in the family became old fogies. However, it was human nature to have children, and even immortals were never tired of it. In the celestial bestowment state, in the sky above the main peak of the paradise immortal realm, there was a majestic palace that shone with a golden light. The moment the great bright wheel flew into the mountain range of the pure bliss immortal realm, it was immediately subjected to layers of interrogation. However, with the golden sunset token in his hand, his journey could be said to be unimpeded, and he directly flew up to the half of the mountain peak that was floating in the air. The top of the mountain had been pushed to the ground, and the ground was paved with shiny golden bricks, forming a huge golden plaza. There were golden pillars, golden towers, golden arch bridges, and golden railings everywhere. In addition to the towering golden palace in the distance, this was a golden kingdom, a golden world. Deming Luan didn't know why the immortal emperor liked gold so much, but he knew that other than the inner guards of the immortal palace, no one else was allowed to fly in the golden plaza. As soon as he landed in front of the righteous heaven gate, on this golden plaza, 2 golden-robed guards standing with their halberds raised immediately waved their spears to stop him. Deming Luan pushed out a token that shone with golden light with a single palm, and the 2 guards immediately returned to their original positions. Flying was prohibited here, so the great bright wheel could only obediently walk along the main axis straight to the immortal palace in the distance. This was the main path to the immortal palace, and there were railings on both sides with all kinds of immortal beasts carved on them. After walking for a short while, he saw an expressionless person walking over from the direction of the immortal palace. Deming Luan and that person were startled for a moment, then they both revealed a smile and walked face to face. That person was none other than the immortal palace's external affairs great commander Wu Xiong. The 2 of them had a good relationship in the immortal palace. "Brother Wu, long time no see." Deming Luan cupped his hands and smiled. "I heard that you are about to get married, but I have seen your little wife in the illusion immortal city. You are a man, but you found a wife who looks like a spring onion, aren't you afraid of crushing her? Don't make fun of me when the time comes, you will definitely drink at the wedding." The short-bearded Wu Xiong smiled bitterly. Recently, there really were many people in the immortal palace who used this to make fun of him. He waved his hand and said, "Why did you come here for no reason? Are you looking for the immortal emperor?" "That's right." Deming Luan smiled, but his eyebrows slightly moved. Who knew what he was thinking when he saw Wu Xiong? "Then there is no need to go to the immortal palace. I just went there and the immortal emperor is not there." He said he went to the newly built dancing immortal palace below. "It just so happens that my wedding day is approaching, and I want to ask for leave from the immortal emperor. Why don't we go together?" Wu Xiong waved his hand and invited. "What a coincidence, it just so happens to go there." Deming Luan smiled and the 2 of them walked out side by side. Just as Deming Luan was about to say what he was brewing in his stomach, Wu Xiong took the initiative to ask, "As the leader of the Merchant Alliance, you rarely come back. Could it be that something big has happened?" "Something big has indeed happened. This matter might even involve the 2 of us." Deming Luan sighed. Wu Xiong stopped and squinted his eyes. "Brother Ming Luan, are you joking or trying to scare me? What kind of big matter could involve me?" Deming Luan smiled bitterly and shook his head. He immediately told Wu Xiong about Yu Qianqiu's fight with someone in the illusionary immortal city. He emphasized the situation of Yu Qianqiu controlling the myriad swords. So this Yu Qianqiu is very likely a remnant of the myriad swords demon monarch. But what does this have to do with me? Wu Xiong didn't react at first, but his expression changed as if he thought of something. Originally, it had nothing to do with you and me. Deming Luan spread his palms and smiled bitterly. "You should know that I was once close friends with Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu. But what I don't understand is that these 2 guys are actually together with Yu Qianqiu. Although these 2 guys aren't very polite to me now, I can't abandon our friendship and watch them die. That's why I took the risk to come to the immortal palace to see the immortal emperor. And you? I say your little wife Mu Tianjiao didn't stay at home. She just had to run to the illusionary immortal city to support Yu Qianqiu's World Merchant Association. She caused such a commotion that everyone in the world knows that your family is friends with Yu Qianqiu. I say, aren't you and your wife looking for trouble? She went to the illusionary immortal city with my permission. Wu Xiong's expression didn't look too good. He didn't expect to get into such trouble. He stared at De Mingluan and asked, Brother Mingluan, how are you going to report this to the immortal emperor? Actually, I've already investigated Yu Qianqiu. I'm very sure that he has no relationship with the Myriad Swords demon monarch. But he just happens to cultivate a Guiyuan sword technique that can control the Myriad Swords demon monarch. Actually, this sword technique doesn't have any power at all. It's just for show. It can't compare to the Myriad Swords demon monarch's invincible sword technique. Take a look at this. De Mingluan took out the sword technique that Yu Qianqiu had given him. The jade archive that he crushed in front of Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng was actually fake. He had put in some effort to reconcile with his two brothers. In reality, how could he so easily destroy something that he wanted to bring to the immortal emperor as evidence? Chapter 894. Wu Xiong examined the contents of the Jade Archive. He couldn't make out anything in a short amount of time, but he believed that De Mingluan wouldn't dare to fool the immortal emperor with something fake. He threw the Jade Archive back to De Mingluan and said with an unfriendly expression, De Mingluan, what do you mean by telling me this? Are you trying to threaten me? What are you thinking? Do you think I'd threaten you? De Mingluan put the Jade Archive away and sighed, I just want you to be mentally prepared. You might as well postpone your wedding to avoid being implicated. If things go south, you still have to get rid of them when you return. It's just a woman and there are plenty of women in the world. With our status in the immortal realm, we can get any woman we want. Brother Wu, it's best if you kill her and show the immortal emperor your loyalty. After all, you've only known each other for a short while. This will clear your name. As he spoke, he made a throat-slitting gesture. Wu Xiong's face immediately darkened. He stared at De Mingluan and said in a low voice, Are you saying that I should kill my own woman? Brother Wu, you're being too serious. If she really was your woman, how could I say such a thing? De Mingluan waved his hand and revealed an expression of a man who was decisive. She hasn't married you yet, right? She's still some distance away from becoming your woman. Wu Xiong clenched his fists in his sleeves and narrowed his eyes at De Mingluan. Then why aren't you afraid of being implicated? Why are you willing to take the risk to ask the immortal emperor to rid Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng of suspicion? That's a completely different matter. Haven't you heard that brothers are like limbs and women are like clothes? De Mingluan glanced at the sleeves that covered Wu Xiong's fists and said calmly, Women can be changed but not limbs. Women can be changed but not limbs. You're indeed a rare man. No wonder the immortal emperor gave you control of such a large merchant alliance. Wu Xiong scoffed, Then how are you going to protect them before the immortal emperor? De Mingluan said with a serious expression, I will do my best until my last breath. I will use my life as a guarantee to immortal emperor that Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu did not know that Yu Qianqiu could control 10,000 swords beforehand. Wu Xiong nodded his head. With his hands behind his back, he slowly circled around the Great Bright Wheel twice. After pondering for a while, he stood face to face with the Great Bright Wheel. He squinted his eyes and said word by word, Brother Mingluan's words about women being like clothes, forgive me for being unable to agree. De Mingluan was wide-eyed and tongue-tied. Then he swiftly looked around and waved his hands repeatedly saying, Brother Wu is talking nonsense, talking nonsense. If someone else were to hear this, then it would be very troublesome. I dare to say such words because I am not afraid of trouble. My woman can be bullied, humiliated, and not abandoned, but that is only limited to myself, it is not up to others. If I cannot even protect my own woman, then no matter how high my position is, I will only be a coward who will never be able to rise again. How would I have the face to live in this world? Wu Xiong pointed at De Mingluan and spoke resolutely. Then he slowly put his head in front of De Mingluan and said, Neither too fast nor too slow. Brother of Mingluan values brotherhood so much, Wu Xiong's heart is comforted. I did not make the wrong friend. You and I have been friends for many years, but why do I feel that in your heart, I am not as good as Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng? Could it be that you do not see me as a brother? De Mingluan was surprised. Why does Brother Wu say this? If we are not brothers, then why would we say such words here? Then why are you willing to risk your life to save Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng when they are in trouble, but you want me to abandon my woman when I am in trouble? Is this something brothers should do? Wu Xiong gritted his teeth and said, Comparing the two, since we are both brothers, Why do we need to distinguish which is more important? Deming Luan's brows immediately furrowed and he said in a deep voice, I can risk my life to protect the two of them, and I can also protect your woman and help you solve your problem. But the key is that it is not right for me to protect your woman in front of the immortal emperor. If I really did that, the immortal emperor would suspect you even more. Wouldn't that be harming you? Since you have this intention, why do you need to go so far and give up what is close at hand? Wu Xiong looked around and a smile appeared on his face as he transmitted his voice. Didn't you say that you have already interrogated Yu Qianqiu and confirmed that he is not related to the demon lord of 10,000 swords? Moreover, you have Yu Qianqiu's cultivation technique as proof. What do you mean? Deming Luan asked suspiciously. Wu Xiong transmitted his voice back. You and I both know the immortal emperor's character. If you want to successfully protect Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng, I'm afraid it will be very difficult, and even your own life will be in danger. I have a slightly better idea. Why don't you try it first? Maybe it can save us from this crisis. Deming Luan's eyes lit up, and he also transmitted his voice back. Since you have a good idea, why don't you say it quickly? Wu Xiong transmitted his voice back with a smile. You first do official business, don't mention the matter of protecting Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng, just mention the matter of Yu Qianqiu controlling the demon lord of 10,000 swords, then say that after your detailed investigation, you have already confirmed that Yu Qianqiu is not related to the demon lord of 10,000 swords. And because I came into contact with that Yu Qianqiu when the Divine Ruin Realm opened, I will use this as a reason to interrupt and put in a good word or two for Yu Qianqiu. The immortal emperor is not a fool. If we say this, he will naturally understand our selfishness. As long as we don't make things clear, it will not damage his impartial style of doing things, and it will not affect his decisiveness in killing in the future. Plus, we have been loyal to him for so many years, maybe this matter will be left unsettled. In fact, this was exactly what Deming Luan wanted to do. Because he was afraid that one person's weight was not enough, he beat around the bush and pulled Wu Xiong in. Based on his understanding of Wu Xiong's character, he had indeed fallen into his trap. Deming Luan was secretly happy, but his face still showed some worry as he said, Will this work? Why don't we just make things clear? I will protect Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng, you protect your woman, maybe he will let us go on account of our many years of service. He talked back and forth, but he did not mention protecting Yu Qianqiu. In fact, his purpose in coming here was to protect Yu Qianqiu. There was no other way, since Wei Chuanqiu had already said that Yu Qianqiu was very important to him, he could only do his best. In fact, Deming Luan was indeed a person who valued relationships and righteousness, but he also knew that in order to survive in the immortal world, it was unavoidable to use the necessary methods. Although some methods were not suitable for his brothers and friends, it was most important to do his best to protect everyone. He was the type of person who had the ability, methods, schemes, and even ruthlessness. It was because of this ability that Jin Tai picked him to lead the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. However, he was also the type of person who put in the effort for his brothers and friends without asking for anything in return. Because of this, he felt that the long path of cultivation would not be lonely, and he would not let the merciless years gradually make him cold. This was because he knew better than others that the path of immortality was long. No matter how far one walked, no matter how high one's cultivation was, one would still be lonely. And friends like Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng, who could risk their lives for him at any time, were indispensable. It was really good to have their company along the way. Although they were beasts and he was human, sometimes beasts valued relationships more than humans. If he lost a friend like this, he would not be able to make up for it even if he wanted to, so Deming Luan wanted to do his best to protect them. Because such friends had come all the way, they had gone through all kinds of trials and tribulations. Everyone knew each other very well. It was almost impossible to find such a reassuring friend in the immortal world. There were many people with low cultivations who were willing to make friends with you, maybe because they wanted a backer. Those with equal cultivations were all scheming and deceiving each other. Those with higher cultivations were mostly disdainful of making friends with you. At least there was one thing that Deming Luan believed: if he encountered any trouble, Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng would risk their lives to protect him. They would fight with him while bathing in blood and killing enemies together. They would definitely not leave him until death. Wu Xiong frowned and said, When have you ever seen him show mercy? He has ruled the immortal world for so many years and has always been ruthless. If he shows mercy to us today, there will be others who will beg him to show mercy in the future. At that time, if he doesn't show mercy, the hearts of the people will be in chaos. How will he rule then? Do we really want him to kill everyone in the immortal world? So we have to give him a reason to show mercy. We can't make it clear. Only then will we have a chance. Taking a step back, he might implicate Yu Qianqiu and the others and let us go. If he still doesn't let us go and wants to kill to the end, then there's no other way. We can only beg him to show mercy. Success or failure, this is the last resort. To be able to reach their status in the immortal world, none of them were simple characters. Their words and actions were all far-sighted. Deming Luan sighed in his heart. Originally, he only wanted to bring Wu Xiong along to beg the immortal emperor because the two of them would have a higher chance of success. In the end, they were both capable subordinates of the immortal emperor, who knew that Wu Xiong would think further and more meticulously. His method was also more comprehensive. So, this time he really let Wu Xiong down. Deming Luan nodded solemnly and said, "All right, we'll do as you say." Wu Xiong slowly let out a sigh of relief. The two of them then strode out of the righteous heavenly gate, and turned into flowing lights as they flew downwards. At this time, Yu Qianqiu was probably still thinking about how to develop and strengthen his forces at the World Commerce Association, leisurely dreaming his sweet dreams. Little did he know that by casually showing off his skills and causing a ruckus, he had pulled a hair and affected the whole body. He didn't know how many people had been implicated, and all of them were unable to eat or sleep in peace. Some were anxious, some were terrified, and some were trying their best to help him solve the problem. Using the conclusion of Wu Sihai from the four great families, this guy was a jinx. Wherever he went, he would be uneasy. However, what Wu Sihai didn't expect was that Yu Qianqiu had already brought disaster to the immortal world. A large group of people were terrified by his unintentional actions. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.